Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome to our channel. The date is Monday, the 1st of June 2026. This is our 77th Tawheed Halaqah. We are on volume 4, part 2 of the book, chapter 7, page 120, 284. Chapter title is Divergence of Divine Laws and its Relationship to Acts of Worship. Some proponents of this Wahhabi sect have endeavored to circumvent the argument we previously set forth by asserting the following. With every divine revealed message and Sharia, there necessarily emerges a set of commands and prohibitions along with criteria for kufr and iman. It is in accordance with these criteria, delineated in the revealed dispensation from Allah, exalted is He, that conceptual frameworks and even terminologies are shaped. Thus, the conception of disbelief in the Sharia brought by the chosen one, Muhammad ﷺ, differs from that which was conveyed by Isa ﷺ, despite the fact that the theological foundation of all messages remains unified, namely the testimony that La ilaha illallah, there is no God except Allah. They further advance this view by providing examples such as the claim that drinking wine is kabair, one of the major sins in the Sharia of Muhammad ﷺ, whereas it may have been among the most permissible of acts in the legal code of other prophets. Our response is as follows. Your statement is overly general, containing a perilous, indeed ruinous, conceptual conflation. Hence, it comprises both truth and falsehood, as shall become evident in the following clarification. Indeed, the final and sealing deen has abrogated all previous dispensations. Consequently, what was prohibited therein is no longer prohibited, and what was obligatory is no longer deemed obligatory. Any rulings within our Sharia that coincide with or even exactly match those of a prior dispensation are nonetheless to be regarded as a newly legislated provision, renewed and independent, despite their congruence with previous laws. They are not to be viewed as affirmations of the former. In any case, such an understanding is necessitated by both the dictates of revelation and reason. However, abrogation pertains exclusively to al-ahkam al-taklifiyya, prescriptive legal rulings, namely wajib, i.e. fard, obligated, mustahab, recommended, halal or mubah, the purely permissible, the makruh, disliked, and the haram. Also, as well to al-ahkam al-wad'iyya, the declaratory rulings, shihha, validity,
صح.
bultan, invalidity, fasad, corruption, sabab, cause, shart, condition, and other such categories. It is indeed true that terms and conceptual categories of this sort vary across the different divine laws. Yet there also exist objective terms and conceptual frameworks that pertain to specific ontological realities, either as descriptions thereof or as judgments upon them. These fall within akhbar, the domain of reports, and it is both rationally and theologically impossible for such reports to be subject to abrogation. A report is either true or false, nothing beyond that. Indeed, there may exist statements that are not precisely delineated and thus cannot be categorized simply as true or false, for they are composite. Some of their components are true, while others are false, such as this very statement of yours, which we are now analyzing and discussing in its various parts. Once it is refined and broken down into its constituent elements, it becomes possible, in principle, to judge it accordingly. Yet, this may be difficult for me or for you, but it is theoretically possible, if you wish, say, as it is in the knowledge of Allah, the Almighty, the All-Wise. There are also linguistic utterances that may appear to be propositions subject to truth or falsehood, while in reality they are void of content, such as the statement, the human soul is green in color, for the soul does not belong to the category of corporeal entities to which the concept of color can be meaningfully applied. The correct response in such cases is to say, this is a meaningless statement, for color concepts do not apply to the soul in any way whatsoever. For if one were to say the human soul is not green in color, one might mislead the listener into imagining that it is, for instance, red. Let us not prolong this matter further, for it ought to be self-evident. It is known that through both sensory perception and reason prior to the advent of revealed law, as it is embedded within the very structure of the intellectual intellect, and was granted to man before he was addressed with the obligations of divine legislation. For the imposition of legal responsibility is inconceivable in the absence of reason. The exalted, blessed are his names, and exalted is his station, has said, وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا ثُمَّ عَرَضَهُمْ عَلَى الْمَلَائِكَةِ. And he taught Adam all the names of things, and then he presented them to the angels. That's Surah Baqarah 31. As for the examples you have cited, they constitute a proof against you, not in your favor. Note the earlier example mentioned concerning drinking wine. To that I reply, you have spoken truthfully, and your justification is sound and commendable. However, wine is still wine, and it refers to any intoxicating substance. This is an objective reality, apprehended through sensory perception, empirical experience, and rational discernment. Yet the legal ruling concerning it differs from one dispensation to another. The concept of wine in our law and in previous dispensations remains the same, insofar as it is a material substance that is drunk or eaten, inhaled or smoked, leading to intoxication, which is a well-known alteration in the state of mind and soul. However, the legal ruling regarding its consumption differs according to the specific Sharia. When the Prophet ﷺ and his family, peace on him and his family, said, whatever intoxicates in large quantity, in another narration, a farq of it, then a smaller amount of it, in another narration, even a palmful of it, is forbidden. He referred to a tangible reality. Things are named or described as muskirat, intoxicants, a term well established in the Arabic language, known to the Arabs prior to the advent of revelation, and whose reality is apprehended through the necessities of sense and reason. Then a legal ruling was issued concerning it, namely that it is prohibited. We have stated repeatedly that the concept of ibadah likewise possesses an objective reality, one that is necessarily apprehended in its essence by the faculties of sense and reason prior to the advent of the revealed laws. Otherwise, the proclamation of the prophets to their peoples, worship none but Allah, would be devoid of meaning, for the people would have responded, what is the term ta'budu, or its equivalent in our languages? We do not know what it means. Yet the empirical reality, the testimony of historical continuity, and the unequivocal text of the Quran all indicate that they immediately understood what was being demanded of them, and the majority of them hastened to express rejection and protest. ما نحن بطارق آلهتنا عن قولك. We will not forsake our gods merely on account of what you say, and that's from 1153. أجعل الله آلهة إلها واحدا إن هذا لشيء إجاب. Has he made the gods into one? This is indeed a strange thing, and that's 38.5. The people understood immediately and instinctively the intent of the Prophet the intent of the prophets, peace be upon them, and recognized it as the greatest calamity, the complete negation and the total demolition of their inherited traditions. For it necessarily entails the nullification of their supposed gods, deities, and the assertion that they were but myths with no existence in reality. The essential question then is, what is the concept of ibadah, worship, or the concept of ilah, God, deity, around which the dispute with the prophets and their peoples revolved? And what is the relationship between these two concepts? It is therefore necessary to define precisely the concept of ibadah and that of ilah, and to clarify which of the two is primary and which is derivative. This is what we have previously set forth, and that clarification and exposition shall be further reinforced through the refutation of any arising objections and specious arguments or by demonstrating that they lie outside the scope of the matter under discussion, as has already been shown and will be further demonstrated by the will of Allah step by step. This, then, is what must be clarified before anything else, just as it is necessary to determine whether the beverage being consumed, or the herb being smoked, or the pills being swallowed fall under the category of muskirat, intoxicants, or not. The legal ruling regarding the smoking of that herb or the ingestion of that pill is a separate matter that comes afterwards in due course. The issue here, as in other actions, concerns the nature and essence of the act itself, that is, mahiyya, essence of the act, including, where applicable, any beliefs or conceptions that precede or accompany it. It is not a matter of the degree, intensity, or matter of the fact, or manner of the fact. For instance, a drowning person in desperate need who calls upon those who are standing on the shore for help has not worshipped them besides Allah, regardless of the intensity of his call and the desperation of his plea. This is agreed upon by us, by you, and by the consensus of all rational individuals. Likewise, those who shrank from battle despite it having been made obligatory upon them out of fear and dread of death, injury, pain, and hardship, whose fear of mankind reached a level or even exceeded their fear of Allah, as explicitly stated in the Quran, were never declared by any scholar of Islam to have thereby become, through such a blameworthy and reprehensible stance, though undoubtedly indicative of weakness of faith, worshippers of mankind besides Allah, or mushrikeen, whose act constituted disbelief, or whose act constituted disbelief that expels one from the deen itself. Indeed, we could fill hundreds of pages here in demonstrating that there exists no act among the act of created beings in the world where the bodily and physical actions, such as prostration and bowing, or inward actions or emotional states of the heart, such as fear, love, and all that can, in and of itself and merely as an act, be rightfully classified as ibadah. Rather, in order for it to be rightly designated as ibadah, it must be preceded by a particular belief or conception concerning al-maf'ul bihi, the object of the action, or al-maf'ul li-ajlihi, the intended purpose, or the one toward whom the action is directed, within the mind of the fa'il, the actor of the doer. It is this belief which is the actual subject under scrutiny that serves as a motive for the act, such as prostration or bowing, or as the stimulus for the feeling or emotional state, such as love, fear, or awe. Were we to choose, we could author hundreds of pages by analyzing each act individually to establish this point. However, in the preceding examples of prostration, bowing, inclining, standing, and supplication, there is sufficiency and no need for further elaboration or tedious repetition. Through this discussion, in addition to the necessary evidences presented in previous chapters, it becomes clear that it is invalid to label or regard any action or emotional state of the soul as ibadah, merely on account of it being an act or emotion, without the presence of the relevant belief or without considering the content of the belief regarding the one to whom the act is directed, connected, or performed for. What has been stated thus far is sufficient. Allah willing to demolish the false proposition, one that is at once innovated, misguided, and destructive, that certain acts are by their very nature are to be classified as being ibadah, in abstraction from the belief held by the doer concerning the entity to whom the action is directed, or for whom it is performed, or upon whom it is enacted. Nevertheless, we may return to this point with further clarification and examples whenever occasion permits. As for the type of belief or conception on which an act must be based in order for it to be classified as ibadah toward al-maf'ul bihi, the object of the act, or maf'ul li-ajlihi, the one for whom it is done, it is by both theological and rational necessity, none than uluhiyya, divinity, including within it rububiyya, lordship, or nidiyya lillah, association as rival to Allah, as we have detailed in earlier chapters and discussions of this book. No alternative is permissible, and it is inconceivable that a matter be otherwise. Therefore, we reiterate the following important principle. No action of the heart, emotional state of the soul, utterance of the tongue, or bodily act may rightly be called ibadah in the correct sense employed by the eloquent, pure-blooded Arabs in the discourse about gods and religions at the time of the Quran's revelation, unless it is preceded by and founded upon a belief in uluhiyah, rububiyyah, or nidiyah lillah, even in a single aspect or particular meaning thereof, the one to whom the act is directed, for whom it is done, or toward whom it is intended as a means of nearness. The concept of uluhiyah included rububiyyah and nidiyah lillah is thus necessary prior to the concept of ibadah, and acts of ibadah can only ever be directed towards an ilah, God, deity. We have previously presented in a previous chapter the case of the worship of the jinn as an example illustrating the correct definition of the term ibadah. There we stated, whoever believes that the jinns are capable of hiding from Allah, or that they can escape his grasp, evading and overpowering him by flight, such a person by virtue of his belief is a mushrik and a kafir, an apostate from Islam, should he have previously entered its fold validly. It follows then that his fear of the jinn is ibadah, even if that fear be feeble, despite his belief that he may overpower them or outwit them or manipulate them through sorcery, talisman, and incantations. This stands in stark contrast to the fear of a Muslim fearing from a lion as it attacks him. For although that fear in such a case may be overwhelming, seizing his entire being, such that his heart and mind are consumed by terror, and although he may flee in panic, fleeing into a ravine without even perceiving it, nonetheless his fear is not ibadah. Far be it from Allah that such fear be deemed ibadah, and far be it from Allah that he should die a mushrik and a kafir were he to perish in that fall. Whoever claims this, or anything akin to it, has indeed abandoned reason and departed from Islam. So let such as one rejoice in his ruin. These examples also demonstrate through a different lens that previously presented the grave error in the definition proposed by Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, who defined ibadah as the utmost humility combined with the utmost love. Indeed, such is the proper state of one who worships Allah, but it is not the essence of the worship of Allah, and hence cannot serve as its definition. Yet this is the state of one who truly worships Allah, exalted is He, if the worshipper is sincere and truthful. Otherwise, it is a deficient or a rejected act of worship, but it is nevertheless remains deserving of the term ibadah, and does not thereby become mere physical exercise or a commercial transaction due to its shortcomings. The mushrikeen worship multiple deities, and in most cases the chief among them, such as the god of the town, the tribe, the family, or its patron, receive the greatest share of love and humility. Does this mean that the other gods were not worshipped because the love or humility shown to them did not reach its utmost extent? Are they therefore monotheists? This line of analysis also reveals that the adversaries of the Wahhabi sect among the Sufis, Brelvis, and others who share their fierce opposition to the Wahhabis are not in a better position, nor do they exhibit greater intellect in the response to the matter, especially when they present niyyah, intention, or the actor's purpose as a central issue and the decisive factor in this question. The invalidity of assigning niyyah or qasd, was it qasd or qasd?
قصد.
Sorry?
Whether will is directed, قصد.
Okay.
Purpose.
Okay.
Direction.
Is that a dal at the end then? Da? Okay. as the determining
صاد قصد
طا.
صاد قصد
So,
قصد يقصد قصد
what's the final letter? Final, is that طا or ضا?
neither صاد قصد قاصد
دا. Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
صاد سين شين صاد ضاد
Yeah, that's right. Okay. As a determining criteria, the invalidity of assigning niyah or qasd as the determining criteria in this matter becomes evident upon reflection. Fear, for instance, arises in most cases involuntarily within the soul, without the intervention of will, intent, or conscious decision. Hence, it cannot be said that such fear becomes ibadah merely by intent, nor can it be classified as instinctual fear by intent. When Qais ibn Sa'ad ibn Ubadah wished to prostrate before the Prophet ﷺ, his intent was tahiyya and ta'zim, salutation and reverence for one whom he believed to be a revered prophet. Similarly, when a pagan sees an idol of one of his gods on the roadside, he may prostrate before it, intending tahiyya and ta'zim for the one whom he believes to be a revered deity. In both cases, the intent is the same, salutation and reverence, and the act is the same, prostration, yet the belief concerning the one prostrated to differs entirely. The mushrik believes in the divinity of the object, and thus his prostration is ibadah, while the companion attributes no divinity whatsoever to the one he prostrates before, and thus his act is not ibadah. The intent is the same and the act is the same, yet the classification differs due to the belief concerning the recipient.
So the prayer resolution that we talk about intention and so on is irrelevant. Neither the intention nor the act itself. What is the belief about the object you are directing the action or connecting the action to? That's the point. The creed about that. What you believe about it.
Exactly. So it's both intend a form of reverence, but one reverence based on a belief of divinity.
Respect, yeah.
Intention, though it plays a role in determining whether an action is blameworthy and punishable, or praiseworthy and rewardable, for actions are but by intention, and each person shall have only what he intended. It has no bearing whatsoever on the classification or nature of the act itself. One who kills in error is still called a killer, even if he is not held accountable and is not deserving of the punishment assigned to intentional murder. Yet the reality remains he is a killer, and he does not suddenly become a laugher or a merchant due to a change in intent. Thus, all parties are entangled in confusion and contradiction. There is no meaningful difference between the proponents of the Wahhabi sect and their adversaries in this regard. Most of them, particularly the adherents of the Wahhabi sect, reject deep thought and critical enlightened reasoning, and instead immerse themselves in reviling, cursing, and pronouncing takfir, or in elevating earlier scholars to the ranks of infallibility and sainthood, and in filling pages, even volumes, with accounts of their exploits. Of their exploits, virtues, and intellectual brilliance, whether rightly or wrongly, persisting stubbornly in their mistake instead of correcting them and invoking Allah's mercy and reward for their efforts. However, the Wahhabi sect is distinguished by an even more entrenched hostility to intellectual engagement and reflection, to the point of intellectual bankruptcy. They fall into statements akin to those of the deranged, accompanied by arrogance, self-admiration, and self-righteousness, along with excess in polemics, obstinacy, and alienation. It is therefore imperative to uproot this Wahhabi falsehood from its very foundations in order to halt the ongoing process of undermining Islam, a fear once voiced by the commander of the faithful, Umar bin al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, when he said, "Verily, Islam is only destroyed by the slip of a scholar, the disputation of a hypocrite with the book and the rulings of misguided imams, And this most noble statement was not a product of his own reflection alone. May Allah's good pleasure and peace be upon him, but was something he had received from the seal of the prophets upon him and his family, be Allah's prayers, peace, and blessings in abundance. Okay, so this concludes this chapter. Any bullet points, any summarization?
Summarization is clear. Just read it again and again. These things we expand so it becomes clear. Sometimes over expanding makes things unclear, but you have to read it again. You have to be very picky in these fine points. It's simply that something can be called ibadah in the sense of related to Islam and kufr, tawheed and shirk, only if it is directed, connected to an entity which has some divine attributes attributed to it. That's it. Has nothing to do with the intention. Do you want to honor it? Do you want to slander it? That's irrelevant. Besides, also the issue of fear, which I mentioned, the case of the lion and the case of the jinn, it is clear that some deities are feared only. There's every time you're saying the ultimate in love and submission or humility, dhillah, is wrong. Is wrong because said that's for ibadah to Allah should be like that. But general ibadah is not necessarily contained with love. For example, those who believe in two deities, the good one and the evil one, they don't love the evil one, they hate it. But their fear, their belief in it that it has divine powers or divine attributes is enough to make them mushrik. And their fear is the ibadah. Is a fear of ibadah. It's not a natural fear from a lion. Yeah. And they don't love these deities, almost certainly. So that definition is just simply just absurd. Because some deities are not loved at all. But still, does not make you a believer or monotheist if you believe that they have divine attributes, but they are evil and bad, and you reject them. It doesn't turn you into a monotheist and muwahid. No, you're still mushrik if you have this belief. And all acts directed toward that, fear, etc., can be considered an act of ibadah.
Okay, chapter 8. Invalidity of the definition of worship by Sheikh Sa'di. One of the men, Sheikh Sa'di. So that's Sheikh Abdul Rahman Sa'di.
Bin Sa'di, yeah.
So this is page 293, chapter 8. Of the many comments upon this topic by Sheikh Abdul Rahman Sa'di, may Allah have mercy upon him, the following appears in his book entitled Al-Qawl As-Sadid is of particular note. And so just a footnote here. Famously known for his contemporary tafsir As-Sa'di, he was born in 1957, was born in the town of Unayza in Al-Qasim, Saudi Arabia. Multiple brief biographies of Sa'di are available by way of internet research. Okay. It has been published in many editions. He writes, regarding the definition of Shirk al-Akbar, major shirk, its interpretations that cover all of its types is that the servant directs any type or specific act of worship to other than Allah. Thus, every belief, statement, or act established to be commanded by the lawgiver, when directed solely to Allah, is Tawheed, Iman, and Ikhlas. Directing it to other than Him is Shirk and Kufr. Therefore, adherence to this criteria for Shirk al-Akbar, for indeed nothing falls outside of it.
So that's his definition to escape the problems.
Okay. Looking at this wording, as expressed, the Sheikh does not make any differentiation between al-ibadah, expressed as carrying the definite article of al by idafa, possessive construction, or by complete phrasing such as al-ibadah, acts of worship. Regarding the proof of the matter, it is that shirk with Allah is undoubtedly, by unanimous agreement, worshipping other than Allah. Yet the Shaykh expressed his view of the matter utilizing the phrase that the servant directs any type or specific act of worship to other than Allah. Yet al-ibadah, whether expressed with the definite article by idafa or by complete phrasing, is but a single matter. It is not composed of varying parts. He doesn't make a distinction between al-ibadah and al-ibadat. For Sa'di, al-ibadat comprises the comprehensive set of every belief, statement, or action that has been established as being commanded by the divine lawgiver. Therefore, altogether, they form a defined and restricted category that can only be fully known after the revelation of divine law, at least in theory. It isn't possible for acts of worship to vary between different laws that have been revealed. Yet this notion is based upon falsehood, being an impossibility, as has been demonstrated elsewhere in this present work. As has been reiterated thus far, emphasis has been placed upon the notion that the very concept of ibadah has an objective reality, which is necessarily understood through the medium of reason and sense of perception, even prior to the advent of the revelation of divine laws. If that wasn't the case, then the statements which were made by the prophets to their respective peoples would be rendered meaningless. Statements such as, "Don't worship any but Allah." Their people would have retorted, "But what is this word? What is this word worship? We don't understand what it even means." However, the historical reality, together with the unequivocal text of the Quran, all confirm that these people immediately understood what was being asked of them. Most of them reacted with rejection and protest, as evident from the following verses by way of example. وَمَا نَحْنُ بِطَارِقِي إِلَهِيًا
آلهتنا
عن القولك وَمَا نَحْنُ لَكَ بِمُؤْمِنِينَ. We will not forsake our gods on the strength of your word alone, nor will we believe in you. And that's 1153. أجعل الآلهة إله واحدا إن هذا لشيء عجاب. And that is 38:5. And that verse is, so the first one is, we will not forsake our gods on the strength of your word alone, nor will we believe in you. And the second verse, how can he claim that all gods are but one God? What an astonishing thing to claim. Many other verses readily attest to this. People immediately and intuitively understood what the prophets meant by their conveyance, peace be upon them all. They realized that it would result in enormous upheaval for them, a complete contradiction to the established ways, and the total destruction of their corrupted inherited beliefs, because it necessitated the invalidation of their gods, deities, revealing them to be mere myths, with no real existence whatsoever. Earlier in the present work, we provided cogent evidence for the veracity of the following equation. Al-shirk billah equals ibadah ghayrillah, and equals an taj'ala ma'allahi ilahan akhar. Shirk with Allah equals worshipping other than Allah, equals that you make another God alongside or besides Allah. Further,
according to Quran, these statements are equivalent, looking to the same thing from various angles.
Further flaws within the definition of Sa'di. Furthermore, there are a number of clear and evident flaws which rest in the definition which Sheikh Abdul Rahman as-Sa'di formulated. He made the matter of belief al-i'tiqad upon the same level as actions al-a'mal, whereas our present research cogently shows that belief, or to be more precise, a belief in al-uluhiyya, is a fundamental pillar in determining al-ibadah. In fact, the very concept of al-uluhiyya actually precedes the matter of al-ibadah. Concerning the matter of shirk akbar, major shirk, it is realized by the belief that any aspect of al-uluhiyya belongs or is attributed to other than Allah. This is irrespective of any additional belief or even resultant actions, including speech or seeking to draw close to such an entity, which could be construed or classified as being worship. All acts which are intended to express the matter of reverence, humility, drawing closer to, seeking benefit and averting harm, when directed towards something believed to possess al-uluhiyya, are necessarily understood as being acts of worship. This is by universal acknowledgement, notwithstanding any objections posed by the sect of Wahhabism or any others. Many examples can be marshaled to show this. For instance, many mushrikeen perform ritual dances before their deities, and it is considered as being worship. This is despite the fact there is no actual legal evidence to show that dancing is a form of worship for Allah. Similar can be said of clapping and even whistling, which aren't seen as being worship amongst Muslims, yet for some mushrikeen, they are taken to be religious practices before their idols. In India, followers of the false goddess Durga consider it worship for a woman to offer herself to men. Such a phenomenon is not isolated. The notion of temple prostitution has featured in other mushrik societies, where devotee women offer themselves to men for money, that payment then being given or dedicated to the idol, as occurred among the worshippers of Baal. Evidently, none of the aforementioned practices would be considered as legitimate or lawful worship in Islam. They would be grave acts of immorality and sin. There are many acts which are performed in Islam as acts of worship for Allah, such as sujood, prostration, ruku, bowing, and qiyam, upright standing. In and of themselves, though they are not inherently acts of worship, they become acts of worship when preceded by a specific perception and belief. If not, they remain neutral human acts, neither being inherently of one form or other. Some of these points have been elucidated previously. Making sujood to Allah is a legitimate and recommended act of worship at times, obligations, such as in the prayer. Despite this, it was a permitted form of greeting in previous shariahs. The most obvious example being where this occurred during the time of the Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam. Love for the sake of Allah is rightly considered an act of worship, indeed one of the greatest. At the same time, expressing love for the believers and showing allegiance to them is not taken to be a matter of shirk, but rather a fundamental Islamic duty. By way of another example, obeying the righteous and just political leaders in matters that are lawful is an obligation. Yet this does not contradict the fact that obedience to Allah is the highest form of worship. From all of this, it is clear that love, prostration, and obedience is in and of themselves as abstract acts are not inherently construed as being acts of worship. Therefore, they cannot be defined as such. That only comes about when coupled with a belief that precedes it. Otherwise, such actions remain within the domain of being human acts. Minor shirk, next section. Following on from the previous analysis, we can also firmly conclude that the definition of minor shirk al-Asghar, which Sheikh Abdurrahman as-Sa'di penned, is also invalid. In this respect, he argues, as for the matter of shirk al-Asghar, it is every means and pathway that leads to shirk al-Akbar. Shirk arising from intentions, statements, or acts that have not reached the level of al-ibadah. Once again, this definition contains several fatal flaws. Firstly, the definitions which al-Sa'di provided for ibadah and shirk akbar are incorrect and inconsistent, as previously shown. Facially, he also includes that within his definition of shirk al-asghar, rendering this ultimately of little to no utility. Fatally, he also includes within his definition of shirk al-asghar, rendering this ultimately of little to no utility. I'm not sure if that's been correctly translated. Secondly, the matter of shirk al-asghar is a designation made by the Sharia. It wasn't something that was even known to the Arabs at the time when the revelation mentioned it. In other words, it wasn't a natural or readily understood matter on a purely linguistic basis. As a term, this was introduced to denote or refer to a specific set of actions. The legal texts themselves did not outline an underlying ratio legis or illa that would even allow for some form of structured analogy to be made to extend the definition further. Therefore, when Asadi makes that generalization by arguing it is every, then that naturally leads to labeling particular acts as being within the realm of shirk, even though Allah and His Messenger did not designate them as such. Consequently, this is precisely the definition of bid'ah, innovation in matters concerning the deen of Allah, placing one's judgment ahead of Allah and His Messenger, and no doubt this is a very serious matter. The bitter irony is that people from this sect themselves regard themselves as being the vanguard of tradition against unlawful innovation. Some have even dedicated their lives to campaigning against what they perceived to be wrong, to wrong innovation, such as utilizing prayer beads or even joining the Tabligh Jamaat for 3 days. As noted in the previous volume, the following examples of the astonishment shown by some of the Sahaba and the Tabi'een when they heard the term shirk being used to describe what was termed as shirk al-khafi, the hidden or latent shirk. The first, as recorded in Bukhari's Adab al-Mufrad from Ma'qil ibn Yasar, and this is the narration. I heard Ma'qil ibn Yasar saying that he came to the Prophet ﷺ with Abu Bakr. May Allah be pleased with him. He said, "O Abu Bakr, shirk is more concealed among you than the movement of ants." Therefore, Abu Bakr replied, "Is shirk anything other than attributing another God besides Allah?" The Prophet ﷺ replied and said, "By him who has my soul in his hand, shirk is more concealed than the movement of ants. So, shall I not tell you something which if you say it, it will eliminate its minor or major forms?" Thereafter he said, "O Allah, I seek refuge in you, lest I associate anything with you while I know it, and I seek your forgiveness for what I do not know." And that's from Bukhari, Adab al-Mufrad, Volume 1, number 716. Just a slight interjection. Ironically, what is almost like doing, Sadr Dirai on the basis of doctrinal issues without evidence. That Asadi is almost like making, like when in Ahkam, they make, the closing the doors. He's making a closing the doors argument for something that's as grave as shirk, based off of, I don't know what. This is a bit of a strange. You got away with that without being rebutted. Okay. Continuing. The statement of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, may Allah be pleased with him, an eloquent Arab from the Quraysh, nay, a man at the pinnacle of eloquence in this tradition, is shirk other than attributing another God besides Allah, is precisely our statement that we have previously elaborated. No other meaning of shirk had formed in his mind except taking another God or deity alongside Allah. That is, attributing something of divinity to other than Allah. The prophetic reply regarding the hidden latency of shirk is a new legal terminology brought by the final revelation. This wasn't previously known to the Arabs up to that moment, nor known to Abu Bakr and the other companions. May Allah be pleased with them all. Just as Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, may Allah be pleased with him, was surprised, others were too. For example, the following is cited in the Musnad of Ahmad. Abdullah ibn Numayr narrated to us, Abdul Malik, namely Ibn Abi Sulaiman al-Azrami, narrated to us from Abu Ali, a man from the tribe of Qamil. He said, Abu Musa al-Ashari addressed us and said, "O people, beware of this shirk, for indeed it is more incipient than the crawling of ants." Abdullah ibn Hadim and Qais ibn al-Mudarrib stood forth, and they both said, "By Allah, explain what you just said, or we will go to Umar." "Oh, people, beware of the shirk, for indeed it is more incipient than the crawling of ants." Abdullah ibn Hadim and Qais ibn al-Mudarrib stood forth, and they both said, "By Allah, explain what you just said, or we will go to Umar, irrespective of having permission or not." Abu Musa said, "I will explain what I've said. The Messenger of Allah ﷺ delivered a sermon to us one day and said, 'O people, beware of this shirk, for it is more concealed than the creeping of ants.' Someone whom Allah willed to speak asked him, how can we guard against it when it is more concealed than the creeping of ants? O Messenger of Allah, the Prophet ﷺ replied, say, O Allah, we seek refuge in you from knowingly associating anything with you, and we ask your forgiveness for what we do not know." That's Musnad Ahmad, Volume 4, number 19622. Okay, that concludes this chapter. Okay, I think that's quite self-explanatory. If anyone wants to ask anything,
it's very expanded, very.
Okay, so this chapter 9. I mean, it's interesting how the kind of people that they rely on. I mean, no doubt they have credentials or sincerity, but it's quite flimsy. It seems sometimes it just seems that because they have certain authority, they fall within a certain framework. People just
I think
they
it's
just pass it without.
because of circularity in the mind. But لا تعبدوا إلا Allah. So ibadah is directed to Allah, and Ilah is the one is the ibadah is directed to. So they go into circularity uh, without noticing it. The problem when it becomes when you make conclusion based on the circularity wrong ones. If it is circularity hidden, no problem really. But like for the Sahabi and so on. But the problem later when Ibn Wahab made acts themselves without any show of creed and so on, that then obviously then we go you go in trouble. Then you have shirk al-qubur, you have all these things, worshipping graves and all these nonsense developing this way. Because he could not get out of circularity, he developed that, he was convinced about it, he followed Ibn Taymiyyah in some mistakes, which are less severe than his own mistake, but he followed and made them even sharper. Because Ibn Taymiyyah was still cautious in some sense, but he started that actually. He's the guilty one, mostly. But he was sharp enough and intelligent enough not to make all the errors. But this guy is relatively shallow in the bottom of Islamic civilization. But Taymiyyah was still relatively near to the peak time with scholarship widely spread, with encyclopedic work ongoing and so on. At the time of Ibn Abdul Wahab, especially deep in Najd, there's nothing. Very shallow, no scholarship of any relevance is available there. If there's anything, then a few judges and few faqih judging between the people about maybe dispute about a cow or a camel or something like that. That's all what is there in Najd. Not very much there. And that's where the things like that prosper between simple societies, backward people, and so on. You don't see that prospering initially or initiated and standing in civilized areas, bigger cities, and so on. Actually, I say 2 centuries before Abdul Wahab, there was a Turkish man who came to Cairo, to Egypt, and started something like the Wahhabi movement, but he could not really get the people on his side, and they expelled him out of Egypt. Because societies, the scholarship is much better and the society are more sophisticated, so they could see through there's something not proper in these statements. But in Najd, you barely have that. And still there were scholars against him in Najd itself, Hanbali and others. But they were a minority, very few. The rest, overwhelming majority of people are just illiterate farmers and palm tree maintaining people and people attending to the sheep and camels and so on. Not very much of any complicated society with complicated scholarship. Mm-hmm.
Okay, the chapter 9, page 300. Understanding the verse at 39.3.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so ardent defenders of the sect of Wahhabism are prone to clinging to a plethora of weak reports having no solid textual or factual basis. However, from the Quranic text, we do find them quoting a particular verse very frequently. I'm going to bring up the verse in the Quran. Bear with me a second.
Mm-hmm.
So read the original, the actual text. Okay. This verse is taken from Surah 39, verse 3. Let's bring it up now, and that is Surah the troops throngs.
لما يقربون ما نعبد إلا يقربون إلى الله زلفى. Okay, so
ألا لله الذي ألا لله الذي دين خالص
لله الدين الخالص
والذين اتخذوا من دونه أولياء ما نعبدهم إلا ليقربونا إلى الله ذلفى إن الله يحكم بينهم فيما هم فيه يختلفون إن الله لا يهدي من هو كاذب كفار. Okay, so the translation for the verse, I'll use I'll use the one that they've given here. As for those who choose other protectors besides him, saying we only worship them because they bring us nearer to Allah. And it is often marshaled to present a justification for the positions their sect has adopted. Yet the verse is almost always quoted partially or in a truncated manner, which isn't a surprise given their proclivity for severing texts generally and then taking them out of context specifically. Given this, we would argue that truncating the verse in this matter doesn't help them, nor does it support the positions of falsehood that they are entrenched upon. Although, to begin with, a full analysis of this matter, some core principles should be outlined. Firstly, and all success is from Allah, from Allah the Exalted. When citing a particular Quranic or Sahih Hadith, some critical elements of the utmost importance need to be observed. Including among them are the following. Included among them are the following. Firstly, especially in cases where citations are made directly from the text of the Quran, it is critical to quote the verse in its entirety so that the context is known. More often than not, this may also include mentioning the verses that come immediately before and after it. Failure to do this can often result in the heinous crime of distorting words from their proper places. 446. So this is distorting words from their proper places, and that's from Surah Nisa 46. I think it's Nisa. So
Allah bless the Jews for doing that. That they harifun and carry on more. I mean, twisted words out of their positions or out of their meaning. Truncating ayahs or verses or references is a type of this taking words out of their places, out of their context. Because if you truncate, you very easily can construct something different than the intended original meaning. Maybe the opposite even.
And your commentary there, which can reach the level of disbelief as the act wrenches a verse from its proper context. Secondly, it is to be fully cognizant that Allah the Almighty and Majestic didn't only reveal that particular verse, but a great many others too. Moreover, the prophetic Sunnah contains thousands of Sahih Hadith. Taken as a whole, the entirety of that revelation, the final revelation sent to mankind, requires obedience and reverence to be believed in and acted upon. Thus, it is a heinous crime and manifest ignorance to limit discussion to only a single verse or hadith, when in actuality there may be many upon that given topic. All texts upon a particular subject have to be marshaled together in line with the established principles that relate to usul al-fiqh and the proper rules of legal deduction. What may be mentioned in a brief, concise manner can be found detailed elsewhere. Sometimes the general may be specified in other places. Some matters expressed without conditions may have specified restrictions in another. This is notwithstanding recognizing the rules as they relate to the abrogating and abrogated text. Failure to adhere to these rules can inevitably result in one falling into the category of those who abuse the Quran, meaning fragmenting it and apportioning it into divisions. Those guilty of this, like the people of the previous scripture, take only what pleases them, discarding all that doesn't match their own vain desires. Naturally, as we are repeatedly warned, taking one part of the revelation and disbelieving in another part is catastrophic, resulting in disgrace in both this life and the hereafter, coupled with a severe punishment. As will be quoted shortly, Ibn Abbas, may Allah be pleased with him, provides us a sound attestation to this. Thirdly, reference to the classical and authoritative works of tafsir, exegesis, are imperative, particularly those that have preserved the narratives from the earliest generations of Islam, the Salaf, regarding the interpretation of Quranic verses. Tafsir literature in this regard includes that of the notable Imams like At-Tabari, Ibn Abi Hatim, and Abd al-Razzaq, followed by Al-Baghawi, Al-Wahidi, Ibn Kathir, and others too. If there exists hadith marfu', raised and attributable, with a sahih isnad and matan that provides explanation to the verse, part of it, or even a single word within the verse, then by default it is al-hujjah al-qat'iyah, decisive proof evidence which is not which it is not permissible to disregard except with compelling textual evidence to do so. Okay, let me just
General principles how to deduce from the Quran before answering the details of that ayah.
But you've said that a single isnad and matan would become hujjah. Is that correct based off your current adoption? Because it's not.
Yeah, this is what we said here. It is if it is tafsir of ayah of the Quran with good isnad and so on, then this will be the authority which we have to stick to, unless another Quranic text indicate otherwise. That is clearly there. Yeah.
Yes.
Just read it. It's there. It's in front of you. You should not forsake anything which attribute to the Prophet with good isnad and so on in tafsir. We talk about tafsir because we have the ayah, but which meaning is there? What is the special aspect there? If there's something like that narrated and not being undermined by any other text of the Quran or a mutawatir or something else, then this is the authority which we have to stick to first. Although there may be other meanings additional later, but this one is you can take it authoritative.
Okay, it's not going to override something. It's just going to put additional clarification then.
Yeah, but we're talking about how to make tafsir for ayat al-Quran. We're talking about tafsir. Yeah.
Next,
we're discussing the ayah. The principle is clear. Just we are discussing this ayah before discussing the detailed ayah and show that their understanding is wrong. We give general principle how to deal with the ayahs of the Quran. First of all, they cut the ayah in pieces. That's not permissible. Secondly, in many situations, you have to read the ayahs before and after. The full context has to be delivered. Thirdly, it is not only this ayah and its context that had been revealed. The Quran is having 6,000 plus ayahs. So there may be other ayahs which clarify, generalize, restrict, etc., etc. This has to be taken on board. And then concerning the word meaning and so on, and maybe the case of revelation and so on, which help in understanding the meaning and make it more precise, we have to rely on narrations. Who will have the narration relevant for that? The first generation, the Sahaba, linguistically and also historically. And if there is something which is not contradicted by any other ayahs or any mutawatir, that must be the authority to stick to it. At least you have one significant meaning this way, a certain. There may be other extra meaning there. Yeah, so these are 4 or 5 rules how to deal with this. Not the way they do. Good?
Next, one cannot disregard the broad outlines of the historical record or context of the people at the time of the Quran was revealed, particularly regarding their practices, including worship and systems of life. Moreover, it is extremely useful to know the asbab al-nuzul, the circumstances behind the revelation or reasons for revelation.
Clarify more if you have a story clarifying, because the text of the Quran is usually very, very linguistic, very eloquent and so on. But if you have a story detailing that has been revealed for this occasion, then the meaning will illuminate in your mind easier when you see a story, a special case in which was applied. But does not restrict. That's why Nuzul does not restrict anything. It has been revealed for this, but what is the essential component of this case? That will clarify for you the ayah better than just the language. But the language alone is sufficient if you do it with context and the rest of the Quran. But Asbab Nuzul will make it greatly easy. Will ease on you considerably. Yeah?
Okay.
And we have examples, like for example, the famous discussion about Malakum fil Munafiqeen fi'atayn, which we used in the research about Islamic citizenship and immigration and the right of self-determination as an appendix. It is only like half a page, but there are so many narrations which clarify what is meant there. Like for example, إِلَّا الَّذِينَ يَصِلُونَ إِلَىٰ قَوْمٍ بَيْنَكُمْ وَبَيْنَهُم مِيثَاقٌ, except those who are on the way to people with whom you have a covenant. For example, someone had permitted his immigration, left Al-Madinah and left the domain of Islam and joined the Kuffar Harbiyin. Okay, so he's Harbi. You can kill him. Except if he's on the way to someone with whom you have a covenant, or he has a security hold, or he is resident in that covenant area. Then he's off limit because he has a covenant with the one who has a covenant. And you see the Asbab al-Nuzul, they mention so and so on who broke his hijrah and went to Quraysh back. He was going to meet, he was going to visit a tribal chieftain to do business with him and so on. And this tribal chieftain has a covenant, was a good relation with the Muslims. So Muslim was thinking to ride and take that man, the one from Quraysh, going in the way. And the Quran says, no, you can't do that because he's going there. He's not coming in a battle campaign with Quraysh. Yes, he's Harbi. The moment he's back, then that trip, which is protected by the covenant with the target, is over. Then you can't fight him. But not in while he going to the man or while he is dwelling in, like he was going to a man from Juhayna, I think. As when he's dwelling in Juhayna, having like visa by Juhayna in modern language, in that state he's not a target. He's not permissible. Because if you target him while he is in Juhayna, you are breaking the covenant with the Juhayna chieftain, which you have. Good? For example. But if you read the story or narrate it, it makes the things easier and you don't understand. Otherwise, the ayah says just simply, very terse, very brief, إلا الذين يصلون بينكم يصلون على قوم بينكم وبينهم, those who are having a connection or having a residency at people with whom you have a covenant. If you read the story how it is, then you understand, that's the meaning of it. It clarifies the meaning in your mind. Asbab al-Nuzul. It doesn't restrict to only cases exact similarity now. And you can make that a general principle. You are at war with Israel, for example. There's an Israeli hostile soldier, but he's now at the moment, he is in Russia, for example, with a visa. So he's safe in Russia. With Russia, we have a covenant of security. We are not at war. So you can't go, this is an opportunity. The guy is now in Russia. Let me go there and shoot him. No, it doesn't work this way. Understood? Okay, so that's it. So Asbab al-Nuzul may make things easier to understand. But the ayah, the wording of the ayah indicate that by necessity. But it's very deep. Asbab al-Nuzul make it very clear, simple. For the simplest person, for the analyst will understand. He doesn't need Asbab al-Nuzul. Asbab al-Nuzul is a great help in expanding and understanding the meaning. Is one example. The moment you see that example, I know what's going on. Then you know all other possible examples there. Except those who have a connection to people with whom you have a covenant. That applies to someone going there, settling there for temporarily and so on. Someone leaving the hostile citizenship and getting the new citizenship, so he is excluded from hostility as long as it has this new non-hostile citizenship. If he leaves it again and go back to hostility, then he is liable of being killed if the occasion comes, etc., 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 etc. The wording of the ayah is clear, but only for those who have gone through it very thoroughly. And especially for me, it's easy because I have read the story, the narration. Good. So these are just general principles. I don't want to make like 20 pages about principles of tafsir and how to take the full context and so on. So we'll apply all these things now on this specific ayah, because we are busy now with the Wahhabi for this specific ayah. Because they say, this is what the people, what the Sufi do with the awliya. They make tawassul with them and so on, so they can bring to come closer to Allah. They don't think they are divine. They think that, but it's a mistake. They did not take the ayah in full context. They did not read it properly. That will come now.
Okay, continue with your wording. Moreover, it is extremely useful to know the Asbab al-Nuzul, the circumstances behind the revelation or reasons in revelation in relation to a specific issue. For example, as cited in Asnab al-Ashraf by al-Baladuri, Khalaf ibn Hisham narrated to us, Hushaym narrated to us from Al-Awam ibn Hawshab from Ibrahim at-Taymi. He said, one day Umar ibn al-Khattab was on his own contemplating the thought, how can difference arise in the Ummah while its Prophet is one, its Qibla is one, and its book is also one? So he called upon Ibn Abbas to ask him. about that. Ibn Abbas said the Quran was revealed to us and we recited it, and we knew the circumstances in which it was revealed. But after us, there will come people who will recite it without knowing the circumstances in which it was revealed. So each will have its own opinion about it, and when that happens, they will invariably differ. Upon hearing this, Umar rebuked him. Later, though, Umar sent for him and said, "Repeat back to me what you previously said." Ibn Abbas repeated the statement, and thereafter Umar recognized the correctness of his statement and agreed upon it.
Mhm.
Just
Well-
out of interest, I mean, the thing is, our premise is that these points of view, the Quran, the zikr being protected, the understanding, the Quran Sunnah in its totality being protected, the understanding is
But does not mean that the people after that, after the time of the Prophet, where the arbitrator will tell you the correct meaning in a binding way, is gone, that all people agree in the interpretation and the meaning. Some will make the mistake, take it out of the context, like the Wahhabi. The ayah is there, the same one which was revealed, and still they invoke it in the wrong way. Why? We will see why now in the details. They don't stick the correct principles. They take it out of the context. They did this, they did this, they did that.
Essentially, it's a contributing factor to misunderstanding.
Not using the correct principles not reading the Quran in full and digesting it in full. That's why the Khawarij came out. Yeah. So it will happen if Abu say, how can the Ummah then disagree after the Prophet? The Quran is protected in our hand. And if Abbas told him, it doesn't help just it's in your hand. There will be people who just take a part of ayah and run with it, either out of desire or out of ignorance and so on. Instead of recognizing I am deficient in that, I'm not capable of digesting the whole Quran, and refer back to scholars who are more capable, he make his own ijtihad or his point of view and insist on it, like when they insisted in Safin by Ali ibn Abi Talib, that he has to accept tahkim when people lifted the Masahif. Who insisted on that and threatened even to fight against him? The so-called Qurra, the one who's a Quran reader. You say they are calling you to the book of Allah. I say no, yes, but that is not a correct call. It's a trick to undermine your determination to fight them. We already called them previous to call of Allah, come and bring your witnesses and come to the court. That's the correct call. Not after they fought and make a covenant with the Romans and come fighting you, they now lift the Musahif when that's not calling to the book of Allah. That's a trick. And Ali knows what he's saying. These do not know. They're shallow. They don't understand the correct meaning. And that's exactly what Umar was not noticing. He's looking at things innocent. He thinks everyone is comprehensive. Everyone takes everything on consideration. No, they didn't. And they regard themselves as, since we have memorized the Quran, we are the cream, we understand. Self-praise, self-admiration. Okay?
So,
and also the Quran itself says clearly, there's ayat mutashabahat. There's places who have multiple meaning. And there's muhkamat. How to deal with the one with multiple meaning? Refer back to the muhkam. It's the only way. That's one principle also.
Okay, continue the text.
Yeah.
Given this, readers can refer to the previous volumes in this series to review the nature of shirk as it existed among the Arabs prior to and including at the advent of Islam. By way of attestation to the aforementioned narrative by Ibn Abbas, the following also is recorded in Sahih al-Bukhari. Yaqub ibn Ibrahim narrated to us, Hushaym narrated to us, Abu Bishr narrated to us, reported to us from Sa'id ibn Zubair from Ibn Abbas, may Allah be pleased with them both, regarding the verse, those who abuse the Quran. He said, those who have made the scripture into parts are the people of the book who divided it into portions and believed in a part and disbelieved in the other.
Al-Quran Adin is a plural of Udu. Udu is body part or member. So they dismember the Quran. The Quran is consisting of parts, no doubt about that, but you are supposed to be keeping it whole, not dismember it. Okay.
Recorded in the Mustadrak of Al-Hakim is the following. Abu Zakaria al-Anbari reported to us, Muhammad ibn Abdul Salam narrated to us, Ishaq ibn Ibrahim narrated to us, Jarir reported from us, Al-A'mash from Abu Zubyan from Ibn Abbas in relation to where he, the Mighty and Sublime, says, like the warning we have sent down for those who divide themselves into bands and those who abuse the Quran. He said, Al-Muqtasimin are the Jews and the Christians. He says, those who abuse the Quran, believing in some of it, disbelieving in some of it.
Yeah.
Thereafter, Al-Hakim said, this hadith is sahih upon the conditions of the two sheikhs, but they did not recite it. I would argue that this comment is slightly amiss because al-Bukhari did record this in his sahih in abbreviated form. Ubaydullah ibn Murrah ibn Musa narrated to me from Al-A'mash from Abu Zubyan from Ibn Abbas regarding the verse, like the warning we have sent down for those who divide themselves into bands. He said, believing in some of it and disbelieving in some of it, the Jews and the Christians. Ibn Mu'jam al-Awsat al-Tabrani records the following. Muhammad ibn Ahmad ibn Qussah al-Wasiti narrated to us. He said, Muhammad ibn Ma'mar al-Bahdani narrated to us. He said, Humayd ibn Hamad narrated to us. He said, Habib ibn Hassan ibn Abi al-Ashras narrated to us from Abu Dubyan from Ibn Abbas. He said, a man asked the Messenger of Allah sallam, inquiring, have you seen the speech of Allah, the Mighty and Sublime? Like the warning we have sent down for those who divide themselves into bands, who are the Muqtasimin, replied, the Jews and the Christians. He said, those who abuse the Quran, who are Adin, he replied, they believe in some of it and they disbelieve in some.
Yeah, I believe, yeah. Dismembered it. Believe in some, to some. These ayahs good, we have taken the other ayahs, we don't like it, remove it from the Quran. Some Quraysh were asking for that also.
After mentioning this narration, At-Tabrani said, hey, this hadith wasn't narrated from Habib ibn Hassan except by way of Humayd ibn Haban ibn Khawar. It is known from Abu Dubyan except by way of Habib ibn Hassan, and it is narrated by Al-A'mash from Abu Dubyan from Ibn Abbas in mawquf form. I would argue that the Sahih narrative is the mawquf. It is also said, Habib ibn Hassan ibn Abi al-Ashras al-Qufi as Habib ibn Hassan ibn Abi al-Mukhariq, as if they agreed to leave him out. However, Ibn Adi said in Al-Qamil fi al-Du'afa, Habib ibn Hassan has other hadith than what I have mentioned. As for this hadith and channel's narration, they have closely examined them and see nothing untoward in them. With regard to the quality of his deen being poor, as reported by way of Yahya ibn Kahtan and Amr ibn Ali from Al-Afdas, they are more knowledge about the matters they mentioned, with what they said being possible. As for the chapter on narrative, though, I didn't see anything there untoward of him.
Don't worry about that. It's next. Okay. That's just discussing the hadith and the isnad. Just casually, because we have it here, there, an oddity. Okay. Next, carry on.
Understanding the verses, next section.
I mean, that's a matter of discussion, because that's quite often invoked, because that's it. We don't believe they are divine, but they just bring us closer to Allah. That's the main Wahhabi. We're talking about the Sufi and the awliya and the peers and things like that. Okay. So we see where is their mistake now when we go now to the ayah in the context and so on. Okay. Bismillah. Carry on.
Understanding the verses. We return now to the matter of interpreting the words from the blessed verses, where he, the exalted, says, وَالَّذِينَ اتَّخَذُوا مِن دُونِهِ أولياء ما نعبدهم إلا ليقربونا إلى الله ظلفا. As for those who choose other protectors beside him, saying, we only worship them because they bring us nearer to Allah, and that's from 39:3. Concerning the interpretation of as for those who choose other protectors beside him, it is that they have no excuse or argument except the retort in which they said, we only worship them because they bring us nearer to Allah. Ibn Mas'ud used to recite, awliya qalu ma na'buduhum. protectors, they said, we do not worship them, which is an irregular reading that is not permissible to recite with. It is possible that he only recited it as an interpretation and not as a recitation in prayer, and Allah ultimately knows best. There is a clear and explicit clarification contained within the verse that they had worshipped them, providing the acknowledgement that the actions being undertaken were categorically ibadah, worship. Indeed, Allah the Exalted confirms the reality of the situation, that it is worship. The mushrikeen are called by day and by night by the Messenger of Allah and the believers of his time to abandon such worship, and they are in receipt of a severe reproach. There is no doubt that they have been truthful in this matter, acknowledging their worship as it expresses their particular belief, which in turn corresponds to the reality of the matter. Yet, according to the sect of Wahhabism, that matter of their ibadah exclusively means that it relates to a specific set of acts, be that bowing, prostrating, slaughtering, etc., irrespective of the belief which the one performing the act or actions has. In the Wahhabist mindset, those actions as a collective, irrespective of any underlying belief, constitute ibadah. Even if
they understand the ibadah in their wrong understanding. That's the trap. They're trapping themselves. That's the circularity they don't notice.
Even if the individual firmly believe that they are created beings, owned and sustained by Allah, possessing nothing for themselves, that they have no power over death, life, or resurrection, they have no ability or will by Allah's decree and permission, and that they have no intercession with Allah except by his leave, and so on. Previously in the chapter relating to sujood, prostration, we have categorically argued that the bare act in and of itself is not ibadah. That refutation set out previously will be strengthened in due course. Hence, in our view, referring to the matter of the aforementioned verse categorically stating that they worshipped them means that they took them as gods, deities, believing them to worship, to be worthy and to be or deserving of acts of submission, sanctification, veneration, and the like, all of which resulted in calling it ibadah. They regarded these false deities as being intermediaries of the nearness to Allah, for reasons that the Quran expounds in several other places, and a matter detailed in previous volume of this series, dealing with the historical reality of paganism in Arabia. By way of a summary, to reiterate here once again, there were several reasons underpinning this, including the following. Firstly, they held that those proposed gods, deities, or some of them were the daughters of Allah or the sons of Allah, thereby possessing some kind of inherent divine nature. In other words, they were of divine substance, lineage, or essence. All of that was deemed a sufficient justification in their minds. Secondly, they or some of their undad rivals who can shield against Allah, or that Allah needs to appease them, winning their allegiance, or perhaps even they considered it like they did Iblis, viewing the matter as a duality, a god of good versus a god of evil or darkness, the latter who is to be warded against to avert harm. Thirdly, that they held the view that Allah doesn't know the minutiae of creation, except by those supposed godly intermediaries. He is thus poor, in need of them, and they provide him the intelligence needed. Lastly comes the view that they can, in some sense, escape Allah by flight, a viewpoint not uncommon among the Arabs regarding the jinn and other entities from the tribe of Iblis, or even other considerations not summarized here. Allah the Exalted and Majestic is far and away above all such falsehoods.
But here is obviously they want to come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so it can't be the matter of running away or matter of evil, the matter of daughters and sons who are beloved to their father, and they will bring you closer to him. So that's in this situation, because they want to come closer to Allah. So that's the reason we attribute them divinity. I think they deserve to be attributed divinity to bring us closer to Allah. And this way they are our protector and allies. And that's what we clarified by the ayah next. So that's in that case, this special type of divinity.
Again, has been outlined in previous volumes of the series, was definitive proofs At the very least, some of this was held as sacred beliefs by the Quraysh. Other groups, too, held similar viewpoints and beliefs, be that whole or in part.
So the first answer to the Wahhab here is that the ayah says, "Ma na'buduhum," and you claim "ya'buduhum" meaning making sujood and so on. No, this is wrong as proven elsewhere. But also the context show that this is also wrong from my other point of view, on every point it sees. Now, if you put it in context, the next ayah will clarify. Carry on. But this is just as it is, as it stands, even cut down like that, it does not support their point of view, except if you fall in circularity.
Other groups too held similar viewpoints and beliefs, be that whole or in part. The falsity of the beliefs underpinning the Wahhabi doctrine have been exhaustively set out. Their claims regarding this verse fall by the wayside by the mercy of Allah. Our position becomes clear and definitive from that which is decisively established by the Muhkamat. As such, other matters are indeed referred back to it and built upon it, including seeking clarity on that which is from the Muhtashabihat, lest we fall into the peril of deviation and misguidance. Therefore, we categorically reassert the falsity once again of the Wahhabi understanding as it is applied to this verse. Note well the verse in its context, coupled with the correct interpretation as transmitted by the Imam from the earlier predecessors, the Salaf. The verse is not from among the Mutashabihat. So this will be verses Surah 39, 1-4. Tanzilul Kitab min
Now, this is now the
al-Aziz
context show you
al-Hakim.
what's going on now. So this clarifies the matter completely within the inner context. But before the context, you can't answer to them. You say, they say clearly, ما نعبدهم, the mushriki say, ما نعبدهم. As correct meaning of معبودهم, we attribute divinity to them. We regard them as divine. In that context, to show that we believe that they are the sons and daughters of Allah and they're beloved to their father. So because of that, we do all these acts of worship. So they bring us closer to Allah, not out of fear, just to be. Our main target is Allah Himself. But these are intermediary, but not any intermediary, not human, not divine being, daughters and sons. As the next ayah will clarify. So read now the full context. Now the full context will clarify things. Even if you assume this ayah, the Wahhabi could say, "Oh, your definition of ibadah is not acceptable to us. It may be this, maybe that." And say, "No, let's redo the full context. Then I'll show you where your mistake is done." So finish the mutashabih or the confusion or the multiple meaning with one clear meaning. So carry the ayahs.
Okay.
That's
So
what Zumar, yeah? This is Zumar, yeah?
This is Zumar, was it the troops and the thumbs?
I think it's a Zumar, yeah. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم, yeah.
تنزيل الكتاب من الله العزيز الحكيم إنا أنزلنا إليك الكتاب بالحق فاعبد الله مخلصين له الدين.
مخلصا له الدين. لأن بيقول ولا is it addressed to the plural or to the prophet alone?
له الدين الله ألا لله الذين.
Before that, what it says. إن نزلنا إيش what the ayah says? Read it again.
تنزيل الكتاب من الله العزيز الحكيم إنا أنزلنا إليك الكتاب singular كتاب بالحق فاعبدوا الله فاعبد الله.
Is it فاعبدوا? There's a wow or فاعبد?
No, there's فاعبد الله.
فاعبد الله مخلصا له الدين.
ألا لله الذي
الدين الخالص. ألا لله الدين الخالص.
الدين الخالص والذين اتخذوا من دونه أولياء ما نعبدهم إلا ليقربونا إلى الله زلفى إن الله يحكم بينهم فيما هم فيه يختلفون إن الله لا يهدي من هو كاذب كفار. لو أراد الله أن يتخذ ولدا لا لاستفى مما يخلق ما يشاء سبحانه وهو الله الواحد القهار. The scripture is sent down from Allah the Mighty.
What's the surah? What is the surah there? Zumar.
This let me just. I've got this. This one's just got a translation. So let me just see what's the translation. Yeah, Zumar.
Zumar 1 to 4, I think.
Yeah, so surahs 1 to 4. Ayahs 1 to 4. The scripture is sent down from Allah, the Mighty, the Wise. It is we who sent down the scripture to you, in brackets, Prophet, with the truth. So worship Allah with your total devotion. True devotion is due to Allah. As for those who choose other protectors besides Him, saying, we only worship them because they bring us nearer to Allah, Allah Himself will judge between them regarding their differences. Allah does not guide any ungrateful liar. Allah could choose any of His creations He willed for offspring, but He is far above this. He is the One, the Almighty.
What's the last translation?
He is He willed for His offspring, but He is far above this. He is the One, the Almighty.
What I didn't hear exactly the first. If the translation doesn't seem to be accurate, what does it say?
The whole translation again?
No. The last ayah.
The last ayah. Okay, listen. Allah does not guide any ungrateful liar.
That's the end of the previous ayah.
Okay. Allah could have chosen any of His creation He willed for offspring.
No, that's because the ayah says, لو أراد الله يتخذ ولدا لاصطفى. If Allah wanted a son, the only thing possible is to adopt one of His creation. So this is much more clearly saying what we want to stress.
Yeah, one of the translations on the Islam Awakened is if had intended Allah to take a son, surely He could have chosen from what He creates.
Subhanahu wa Allahu al-Wahid al-Qahar. Glory to Him. He is the enforcer. Yeah. Okay. So this is clear now. Why he is mentioning the issue of son after that? What it seems to be hanging in the air. No, it is that what they say there. We worship and they attribute them divinity, not because of their own sake. They are irrelevant for us directly, but because they're close to their Father and they bring us to Him. And this applies exactly to what means sons. And the next ayah clarifies that these awliya which bring closer to Allah are supposed to be sons and daughters, yeah, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and supposed to be divine sons and daughters. And He responds to them, Allah has no sons whatsoever. Generally, it's impossible. But if He even wanted to have a son, He would adopt from His creation to be a created being. It will not be an ilah anyway. It will not bring you closer anyway. If it's a created being that has no divinity, whatever you do, He cannot do anything more than that. We're just giving a title of a son as a title of election. That's it. A honorific title. Does not make Him a real divine son, which has a divine standing with His Father. So they believe in these awliya who bring closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Zulfa. They are genuinely divine son. And the next ayah shows that's their belief. Because this is the only type which you can imagine bring you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not evil gods, not evil. These are enemies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they will not bring you closer, they bring you far away. That's very clear. So it is of this type. But the next ayah hints that the statue of their awliya is of this type. And then at the same time refuted and showed it's impossible to have even such a divine son. But even if Allah wanted a son, the only thing which is possible, accessible to divine power, is to adopt from His creation. But His adopted from creation is a created being. It's still a created being, is not divine. And hence, whatever you do to Him is not worship and may not bring you closer to Allah. And it's not worship. That's the full meaning now. Clear? So the ayah after that clarify this type which bring closer to Allah must be a divine son or daughter, offspring. And the next ayah hints that the previous one is talking about sons and offsprings, yeah? Okay. But shows two things. Obviously, they believe they're divine sons, genuinely of divine essence. See? This is impossible, cannot exist. And even if in the remote sense, if Allah wanted to have a son, it's impossible to have a divine son, only adoption from creation. But someone adopted from creation, is that a divine? No. So he cannot bring Zulfa to Allah. And all acts directed to him are not acts of worship anyway. It's something else. Does not belong with this ayah. So something else, haram, halal, maybe something else. Is it clear now?
Yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense. Then he added some of the attributes and actions of Al-Wahid, Al-Qahhar, the all-pervading, and he is independent of them. But he is not pleased with their kufr, so he said that this is continuing the next batch of ayahs 5 to 7. خلق السماوات والأرض بالحق يكفر الليل على النهار ويكفر النهار على الليل وسخر الشمس والقمر كل يجري لأجل مسمى ألا هو العزيز الغفار.
So the context finished. Now we mention who is this Allah, what he does. So that's secondary for us at the moment. So the first four are the relevant one for us. Good.
خلقكم, I'll just read that. خلقكم من نفس واحدة.
That's all not relevant to the context. I just mentioned it to see the context ended there, which is relevant for us discussion now.
I see. So, yeah. So for those of you who want to read it anyway, it's
the reason I'm bringing these rest is to show that the first context is finished and closed. So that nobody say, oh, what's about the next ayah? What does it say? It has nothing to do with this issue.
I see.
So the first four. So the ayah at the beginning, ما نعبدهم من قرب الله زلفى. Or Habi could say نعبدهم meaning prostrate and so on, yeah, to bring us closer to Allah. But they are like awliya, like peers, like prophets. That's a possibility. Is a remote. You have to discuss with him lengthy that ibadah does not mean that, and see the equations to the Quran and see the book of Tawheed in full. Quran say you don't need to do all of this and make a headache for yourself. Go next ayah, it will clarify what these entities which are being chosen to bring Zulfa. It must be divine offsprings, because otherwise the fourth ayah does not make any sense. Has nothing to do with the context, neither before or after. It's hanging in air unless they say these awliya are perceived by the mushrikeen as divine offsprings. But this is impossible. The ayah answers even the possibility of that. This is impossible in itself. There's no way a divine son can exist. Absolutely, it's impossible. But even if we assume the faraway assumption that Allah intends to have a child, would like to have a child, it is not accessible to power have a divine child, because Allah to split himself. That's not possible. He's unsplittable. So the only thing possible is to adopt from his creation. So he would adopt one of his creation and give him the title of son as an adoptive son. Just a honorific title. That's it. And the last two attributes of the divine, who al-wahid, is the one and only, who cannot be split. Because to have a son like humans and so on, you have to be composed. You have to be not one complete one in yourself, simple and one. That's not possible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-Qahhar, the enforcer, he can for creation, he can do that, and he can enforce that title as a honorific title. Human adopt. And their adoption is more than just like normal offspring, because they die, the adopted son inherit. In previous Sharia in Islam, that all has been abrogated, and all these things this don't apply to Allah. So all what the created son will be is having the title son. That's mean high level of election class 1, class excellent class. So have election excellent class, election lesser class Khalil, election lesser class prophet, things like that. Classification of election. And then all acts directed to that guy are not worship. They may be halal, haram, that has to be taken from every sharia by itself. Clear? Is the situation now clear how the context will clarify things? So you don't need this guy Wahhabi. Okay, you claim meaning just prostrate for them, or call them, please Isa, help me. Jesus Christ. You call upon him because this pleases Allah, because he's the divine son. The ayah next ayah answers, it can't be a divine son. At maximum, he's adopted as the adopted son. If that's the case, then calling him Jesus Christ is not an act of worship, it's something else. Now, is it halal, haram? That's another issue. That we out of ibadah and non-ibadah into halal and haram. Clear? That's it. So this next ayah clarify. You don't need to go to the complicated theory of ibadah, that the ayah clearly uses the word ibadah, which applies only to something with the where the one caller upon, or the one invoking, or the one prostrating to, or the one who said, believe he has some divine attributes. In this case, because they claim the justification, they actually, our main target is Allah anyway, but these are bringing us closer. So it must be some kind of beloved relatives close to him. So if you, like any human being, if you are good to the children of a man or a woman, they will love you, obviously. It's clear. That's natural. That's natural. The mushrikeen think the same for Allah. But for them, the problem is that they believe these are divine beings in themselves, not just by adoption. And the next ayah settled the matter in both ways. Allah has no genuine son. It's impossible. And even if we assume he wanted to have a son, he never wants. There's no need for wanting to a son whatsoever. If it is, then he will adopt from his creation. But it's from the creation. It is not a divine being. And then all acts directed to him cannot be called ibadah. They may be haram, maybe not allowed. But it's not ibadah. It's out of the story. It's something else, completely different. We have to check hukum shari'i about it. What's the hukum in that revelation? And the revelation may be very well permissible. Yeah.
Regarding the tafsir of the opening verses of this surah, Imam al-Tabari sets out the following in his claimed work. He, the Exalted, in his remembrance says, sent down the scripture which we have revealed it to you, Muhammad, from Allah, the Almighty, the Wise, mighty in exacting retribution against his enemies, the wise in controlling and disposing of the affairs of his creation from none other than him. So don't have any doubt regarding that. The phrasing of tanzil, revealed, sent down, is raised grammatically by the phrase from Allah, and the interpretation of the statement is from Allah al-Aziz al-Hakim, revealer of the book. He says, it is we who sent down the scripture to you, Prophet, with the truth. He, the Exalted, in his remembrance, sent this to his Prophet, Muhammad Sallallahu. Indeed, we revealed this unto you, O Muhammad, the book, namely the Quran, with the truth, with justice. He says, we revealed it unto you, this Quran, which enjoys the truth and justice. And arising from that truth and justice is that you worship Allah, making the deen sincerely for him. This is because the deen belongs to him and not to the awthan, the idols, which can neither bring harm nor benefit.
Again, probably adding ourselves of his imagination. الدين الخالص. الدين means تدين, mean devotion. Devotion belongs only to him. It has to be pure devoted to him. التدين, the devotion. Again, in sense of Islam and Kufr and Islam and Tawheed and Shirk. Not devotion and love your wife and so that's something else. You have a certain devotion there. That's not a matter of discussion. We're talking about the religious devotion. That's the reason it said ad-deen. Because the word deen could mean tadayyun, could mean judgment, could mean as discussed in the opening of the book of Tawheed. Anyway, so at-tadayyun, the devotion in sense of divinity, ibadah, and etc., has to be directed exclusively and purely to Allah Subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ala lillahi ad-deen al-khalis. To Allah should be the devotion purely and exclusively directed. So Tabari is beating other than not to the awthan. Why mention only the awthan and the fake sons and this and that and that? He should have said false deity generally. Actually, the context show that here talking specifically here in the ayah is general to all other deity, to false deities. But the next ayah is talking about really other deity of divine essence, of divine nature, offsprings of Allah, being the prime one, the original deity. Okay, so we read continue Tabari. So even Tabari is not really get it completely from all corners.
Similar to that which we have said was also the statement by the exegetes regarding the meaning of the book. Among those who've mentioned that, Bishr narrated to us, he said Yazid narrated to us, he said Sa'id narrated to us from Qatada regarding the verse, it is he who sent down the scripture to you, Prophet, with the truth, namely the Quran. At-Tabari, he says, worship Allah with your total devotion. The Almighty in his remembrance says, humble yourself before Allah, O Muhammad, through obedience, dedicate the matter of divinity purely to him, single him out in worship, and don't make in your worship of him any partner as the Abdatul Awthan, worshippers of idols.
Who is that? Is that Ibn Abbas explaining, or who is that?
At-Tabari continuing.
No. He mentioned an isnad. We just mentioned from Qatada, from so on. Who is the isnad ending with? Is that Qatada?
Okay. Just a second.
Just go one line or half line back.
Well, that was earlier. That was before the verse. Among those, Bishr narrated to us, Yazid narrated to us, Sa'id narrated to us from Qatada. And then he recites the verse. It is he who sent down the scripture. That's from Surah 39:1. Then At-Tabari continues. He says, so worship Allah with your total devotion. The Almighty in his remembrance says, humble yourself before Allah, O Muhammad.
That's not At-Tabari. That's commenting after the isnad.
Okay.
Read it carefully. Read it carefully.
I can only read the translation, and I can only read as it's written. So, I mean, if it was written, if I could see the original Arabic, I could make a distinction. But here it's just saying, among those mentioned that Bishr narrated to us, he said Yazid.
Yeah, Bishop literally, Bishop narrated to us, yeah. Bishop to us, yeah.
From Qatada, and then he recites the translate.
Qatada is saying that statement. So you see, the wording of Qatada is better than At-Tabari even. Okay. That's the wording of Qatada. After reciting the ayah, he says, that's Qatada. Tabari is transporting that. And then after that, he brings another narration. The meaning of the two first ayah, Tabari explained the summary there, and then say, the same is said by the other Mufassirin. For example, Bishr, etc. Qatada said that. And then he mentioned another isnad after that. So finish the statement of Qatada, reading the ayah, and then
now in brackets says At-Tabari, he says, so worship Allah with your total devotion. The Almighty in his remembrance says, humble yourself before Allah, O Muhammad, through obedience, dedicate the matter of divinity purely to him, single him out in worship, and don't make in your worship of him any partner, as the Abdatul Awthad, worshippers of idols, have. Similar to what we have said regarding this, the people of Ta'wil interpretation have said, and this is Muhammad narrated to us, he said, Ahmad narrated to us, he said, Asbat narrated to us from As-Suddi regarding where he says, Mukhlisin al-Huddin, sincerity to him in the deen, it means Tawheed. And deen is mansub, accusative case, as it is governed by the word Mukhlisan. At-Tabari said, and it's At-Tabari now, and he said, true devotion is due to Allah alone. And that's from 39:3. He, the exalted in his remembrance, says to Allah alone belongs al-ibadah, worship, and al-ta'ah, obedience, without any partner, purely and sincerely, without any partner concerning this. Bar him, all are his possession. It is required to obey the owner of all. The exegetes have said something akin to what we have expressed concerning that. Those who mention that include Bishr narrated to us, he said Yazid narrated to us, said Sa'id narrated to us from Qatada regarding the verse, true devotion is due to Allah alone. That's again 39:3. He said, testifying that there is no God except Allah. And he says, as for those who choose other protectors beside him, we only worship them because they bring us nearer to Allah. 39:3 again. He, the exalted in his remembrance, says, and those who have taken protectors besides Allah worship them and befriending them besides Allah. They tell them, we do not worship you, O gods, except that you may bring us nearer to Allah.
We don't worship you, O gods, except to come closer to Allah.
In closeness and rank, and intercede for us with him regarding our needs. Na'budu ilahi
So Qatada is very conscious that these are regarded by the mushrikeen as aliha. not awliya, not friends, not peers, not prophets. No. Yeah.
It is mentioned of the reading of Ubay, we do not worship you, ma na'budukum. And in the reading of Abdullah, they said, we don't worship them, qalu ma na'buduhum. The variation is acceptable because when a statement is reported, whether the speech verb is explicit or implicit, sometimes the absent third person is treated as if addressed in the second person, and sometimes it remains as the absent form. I've explained this in its
This is rhetoric and eloquence. We don't need to be concerned. We're concerned with the core. But Qatada is getting it right. Say, ما نعبدكم أيتها الآلهة.
I've explained this
on their behalf, but we could make it for the absentee. They don't worship him, regarding them as aliha, except to bring them closer to Allah, not for their own sake, because they are minor, but still aliha. Qatada used the word aliha. That's the reason he gets shifted from talking about them, themselves talking to the aliha, as if they are saying that, which shows Qatada is having a little bit better, deeper thought about this matter, in a natural way, without going the sophistication and the issues we have through the Book of Tawheed. It's still closer to the nature of the first generation and the Arabic language. Yeah.
Muhammad ibn al-Hussein narrated to us, he said, Ahmad ibn al-Mufaddal narrated to us, he said, Asbat narrated to us from As-Suddi, he said, in the reading of Abdullah, they said, we don't worship them. قالوا ما نعبدهم. At-Tabari, the exegetes have mentioned that, which is similar to what we have among those who said
this is quite singular, because if you read the ayah, it's very difficult to construct ma as a negation.
I thought it was ma na'buduhum. I thought usually it's obviously I don't know the proficient. So what would the meaning of ma be then?
We don't worship except that it has to be. You have to mention the except to bring us closer to Allah. That's the reason we are worshiping them, is to bring us closer to Allah. It seems to be Mas'ud meant we don't worship them. They deny that they are doing any worship. But that's not what the mushrikeen were. So that's the reason that claim, unless someone, the one who writes from Mas'ud, made a mistake, what he means. But it's not possible. So ما نعبدهم إلا. The only reason we worship them is to ما نعبدهم. So not denying ibadah, denying that they worship them for other purpose than coming closer to Allah. Denying the existence for other purpose. We don't make them the target, the direct target. The target is still Allah, but these are bringing us closer. But we do really worship them. Yeah.
Okay. At-Tabari, the exegetes have mentioned that, which is similar to what we have among those who said that include Muhammad ibn Amr narrated to us, he said, Abu Asim narrated to us, he said, Isa narrated to us, and Al-Harith narrated to us, he said, Al-Hasan narrated to us, he said, Waraqah narrated to us, all of them from Ibn Abi Najih, from Mujahid, in relation to where he says, we only worship them because they are bringing us nearer to Allah.
Only, that's the meaning of ma, because illa after that, ma kada kada illa.
He said the Quraysh say it to the Awthan idols, and those prior to them say it to the angels, to Jesus, the son of Mary, and to Ezra. Bishr narrated to us, he said, Yazid narrated to us, he said.
So you see also Mujahid is conscious about that. This is for some Awthan which regarded as the representation of divine sons and daughters, but also mentioned explicitly Ezra and Messiah, the sons of gods, offsprings, and the angels as sons of God. Like some mushrikeen, the mushrikeen of Arab regard the angels are all of them daughters of Allah. Genuine divine daughters. Okay.
Bishr narrated to us, he said, Yazid narrated to us, he said Sa'id narrated to us from Qatada in relation to where he says, we only worship them because they bring us nearer to Allah. They said, we only worship those that may bring us closer to Allah, so that they may intercede for us with Allah. Muhammad narrated to us, he said, Ahmad narrated to us, he said, Asbat narrated to us from As-Suddi in relation to where he says, we only worship them because they bring us nearer to Allah. He said, it is a rank or status. Yunus narrated to us, he said, Ibn Wahab narrated to us, reported to us, he said, Ibn Zayd said in relation to where he says, we only worship them because they bring us nearer to Allah. He said, they are our intercessors with Allah. They will bring us closer to Allah on the day of judgment, namely the Awthan, idols, and the word Zulfa means closeness. At-Tabari
You see, Ibn Zayd is later than the others, so his statement is not well structured. Before that, Mujahid mentioned Isa, mentioned so on, so he's clearly catching that these intermediary or shufa'a are not regarded as the target himself, the target is Allah himself. So they want to say, because they were addressed with Tawheed, they say, no, we are not violating Tawheed. We're just using them as intermediary. But they are violating with Tawheed is not matter worship, La ilaha illallah. So they attribute to these divinity. They are not muwahid. Even if they don't do any act whatsoever, just a mere belief is enough for shirk. And then based on that, then the acts will be evaluated. So entering Islam does not happen by sujood or ruku', it happens by statement, by utterance. La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah, la ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah meaning there is only one divine entity who is Allah. Anything else does not exist, or if an entity exists like Isa, it is not having the attributes people claim. So Isa as a divine is an imagination, does not exist, is not real Isa. Real Isa is not a divine. That's the meaning of that. Okay, so that's clarify things. Even the ancient did it roundabout way in a common, simple-minded mainman language was enough for their time. Until this complication later developed. When the shirk of Jahiliyyah and so on completely went and everyone was really monotheist and strict monotheist, then the issues of mashayikh and so on and Sufi developed, and then some people got confused and they started talking about shirk and so on, instead of talking about haram and halal, permissible or not permissible. Essentially, Ibn Taymiyyah is the one who started getting stuck in that, really. Or maybe some people before him, 1 century before, but not very much really. Okay.
At-Tabri, regarding the interpretation of where He, the Exalted, says Allah did not guide any ungrateful liar, Allah could have chosen any of His creation He willed for offspring, but He is far above this. He is the one, the Almighty. 39:3-4. He, the Exalted, in His remembrance says Allah does not guide to the truth and His deen, namely Islam, and the recognition of His oneness. Any ungrateful liar who slanders against Allah and fabricates falsehood concerning Him, and who ascribes to Him what is not of His attributes, claiming that He has a son, fabricating lies against Him, being ungrateful for His blessings and denying His lordship. And he says Allah could have chosen any of His creation He willed for offspring. He, the Exalted, in His remembrance says, if Allah had wanted to take a child offspring, He could have chosen from among whatever He willed from among His creation, meaning He would have selected from among the creation whatever He willed. And he says, but He is far above this. He is Allah, the One, the Almighty. Here meaning the declaration that Allah is far above having a son or offspring, and far and away from what mushrikeen ascribe to Him. He is Allah, He is the One whom all things worship. Even if He had a son, He wouldn't be beholden to Him. All things belong to Him in His dominion, so how could He have a son? He is the one who has no partner in His dominion or authority.
It comes in expressing that because he is not using really a structured mutakallimin or theologian philosophical language. The ayah is saying, it's essentially saying, without stating it, that if Allah ever have the desire, which is impossible, to have a son, then the only thing possible for Him, accessible to divine power, is to adopt from His creation. This can be only a created being, meaning a genuine divine son is an impossibility. It's not accessible to any power. It's just an impossibility. Cannot exist and cannot be created. And the created one is a creation, is not a divine being. But even that is that in previous Sharia, it was used like a language, a rhetoric way of expressing relation to Allah. So He's called Father, and He calls and uses this language which looks like as a giving birth and things like for example, in the Old Testament, allegedly addressing Dawood, say, "You are my son. Today I have given birth to you." It's clearly rhetorical, metaphorical. It's clearly metaphorical. It's just you have a special standing now for after certain acts. The same in some in some of the Gospels, it is, and the historian claimed that he became a son after the baptism. Then he was adopted as a son. So it's adoption, not really genuinely divine. But they structured that the divine son entered in him at that moment. So it's hulul. It's not really adoption, but it's not from the beginning. That's the reason historians say Maryam cannot be said the mother of God, because he was never in her womb as a divine anyway. So she cannot be the mother of a divine. And that's the reason the Catholic Church and the other churches cursed them, and they needed to run away to Persia. But this is all the confusion of people is that, but the Quran is clarifying it. The possibility of a genuine son is impossible. That's clarified in other ayahs. ما ينبغي الرحمن أن يتخذ ولدا. مستحيل الرحمن. That's impossible. That's an impossibility. Even divine power does not extend to the impossibility. That's number one. But even if we assume the other impossibility that he wishes to have a son, which is not the case, except in a metaphorical form, like in the case of the Old Testament and so on. That's the reason Islam, the addressing Allah as Father in heaven or so on has been abolished, is not used, because it was abused in previous religions. So that was abolished. And since the creation are not called sons of God. In other religions is very, Christianity and Judaism is rampant. It's God the Father and the creation and the sons of God. And the Jews also have that, but in the sense of adoption. نحن أبناء الله وأحباؤه. Meaning ways like adopted son, not physical sons or essential sons or something like that. So that ayah, the last ayah, follows the matter clearly, the matter of sonhood, and refer to the previous ayah, clarifying what meant to the previous ayah. So previous ayah is talking really about worship, although their intention is not these persons, divine persons, these minor, secondary, divine persons. No. The intention is the big one, the Father. But even that does not take them out of shirk. It's still shirk.
Okay.
And the acts are doing to these guys, these minor deity, the daughters and sons and so on, is acts of worship, because they believe them to be divine. So that's still shirk. They thought this, no, we are fine. Why are you calling us? Because Islam is La ilaha illallah, not what you do or not do, or what you rank. There's no ranking. There's one divine being and everything else is created. It's slave and owned by him. Period, full stop. Okay?
So let's continue the text. All things that belong to him in dominion, as he have a son, he's of one who has no part in his dominion, the subdue of his creation by his power, before whom everything is humbled, and to whose might are in subdue. That ends the Tabari bit. And this is you're continuing. Note well the interpretation of verse 4 that At-Tabari provides above, marked in the previous long quotation with the numbering 4, and duly highlighted. One should also note the statements from the earlier exegetes, all of which are from Sahaba and Tabi'in, namely, we do not worship you, O gods, except so that you may bring us clearer to Allah in closeness and rank, and intercede for us with him regarding our needs. This is an explicit declaration of their expressed belief in the uluhiyya, divinity of those supposed gods and deities.
So La ilaha illallah meaning no divinity whatsoever, high rank, low rank, it doesn't matter, divinity whatsoever to anything except Allah. Absolutely none.
Likewise,
only one divine being, everything else is a slave. Period, full stop. And these are violating that. So they are mushrikeen, and their acts directed toward the second class divine being, or third class, or 10th class, it doesn't matter, is an act of worship. Good.
Likewise, as previously highlighted from the long excerpt by At-Tabari, the Quraysh say it to the Awthan, idols, and those prior to them say it to the angels, to Jesus, the son of Mary, and to Ezra. The attribution of uluhiyya was made to all of them, as clearly shown by the text of the Quran and the prophetic hadith, as well as the works of seerah and history. One can refer to the previous volume in this series, which exhaustively deals with the nature of paganism among the Arabs.
There's nowhere mention of peers or prophets. They're not mentioned as prophets and so on. They're mentioned as sons, as gods, as etc.
Thus, I would argue that the entire text, as shown from At-Tabari, demonstrates that the subject of the verse is the supposed gods, deities of the Quraysh, namely the angels whom the Quraysh believe to be the daughters of Allah. Exalted is Allah, far above such nonsense and absurdity. Within the same context, note the explicit wording of the verse which says, لو أراد الله أن يتخذ ولدا لا
اصطفى
لاصطفى مما يخلق ما
يخلق ما
يشاء
شاء.
سبحانه هو الله الواحد القهار. Allah could have chosen any of his creation he willed for offspring, but he is far above this. He is the the Almighty. That's 39:4. One may reasonably ask, so what makes the second verse more worthy of consideration than the third, when it is recited in its full context and understood in the language of the eloquent Arabs at the time of the revelation of the Quran? It is muhkam, definitive. It can only appear as being ambiguous to those who seek to divide the Quran into parts, or those who prefer slavish taqlid bordering on sycophancy. In truth, not a great deal of difference exists between them and the predecessors of old. إن البقرة تشابه علينا وإنا إن شاء الله لمهتدون. So you're referring to when they kept bickering with Musa alayhi salam.
Mhm.
Okay. They said, call on your Lord for us to show us exactly what it is. All cows are more or less alike to us. With Allah's will, we shall be guided. Okay. So that's just you mocking them. Okay. But
Mhm.
their condition can be far worse, for they stubbornly persist in their obstinance, retorting that nothing is unclear for us. We are the rightly guided. Surely it would be bizarre, an absurdity, that any individual will seek to ask or beseech anything from a lifeless stone, believing it to be just that, an inanimate object that neither sees nor hears or understands. The Abdat al-Asnam, the worshippers of idols worship false gods, deities that are symbolized by these Asnam. In some instances, believing that they are resident or manifest within them. The Sanam idol
Discuss what Asnam, difference between Asnam and Timthal or picture. Very
at
good.
times even serving as a conduit.
Mhm.
Adherents of these false gods or deities attribute many things to them by their own supposed inherent or even independent power, be that creation, control, and governance, or even the ability to intercede with Allah or provide shelter against Him contrary to His permission. They've even gone as far as to believe that they are some form of species of the jinn, rebels against the cosmic order or gods of evil, opposing the good and acting against the will of Allah. Some have regarded them as having kinship with Allah, believing them to be either divine offspring or consorts and cohorts who may be brought near to the divine realm. All of this and other such outrageous viewpoints have been thoroughly analyzed at an earlier juncture of this work. Hence, this is why Abu Sufyan said on the day of Uhud, exalt Hubul, with the Muslims replying, Allah is far exalted and majestic. The exclamation which Abu Sufyan made was not merely to a lifeless stone statue of Hubul, which was located far away in Mecca at the Kaaba. What he was referring to was a deity called Hubul, which is most likely an Arabized form of the Greek god Apollo, symbolized by the idol held in Mecca at the time. It may be unlikely that the belief which the Quraysh held about the false deity was or may have been similar to that of the Greeks, that he was ultimately a planet, Mars, the god of war, described as being the chief of the gods. Again, as exhaustively outlined earlier in this series, most of the shirk as it related to the simple-minded mushrikeen, be that the Greeks, Hindus, or even the Quraysh, arose from the belief that the matter of divinity is akin to humanity, a genus consisting of multiple kinds and individuals and also producing offspring. But in this instance of divine nature or essence, they may differ in rank, lineage, or pedigree, hence the notion of greater and lesser gods. And it isn't uncommon, much like human history, for them to perceive some supposed deities as being in command of others. It should therefore come as no surprise that they might have as invocation, at your service you have no partner except the partner who is yours. You own him and what he owns. The notion of pre-existing or timelessness wasn't a necessary consideration for the mushrik conceptualized of godhood or divinity. In their worldview, gods can arise into being or even be born. Some could even perish in battle at the clutches of higher gods. Notions relating to perfection or even ultimate freedom of will or action aren't necessarily required for them. Taking a global view, it is noted that in some traditions of the Mushrikeen, their gods are blighted by scandals and other shameful deeds. Some held no central deity to exist, while others clearly did, like the Greeks and the Mushrik Arabs of the Quraysh, who believed in Allah as being the supreme chieftain of the gods, a father of angelic beings. Allah the Mighty and Sublime branded these individuals categorically as being liars, not to mention disbelievers. One may legitimately inquire, what were they actually lying about? There was an element of truth regarding their statement that we worship them, as noted previously in the long excerpt from At-Tabari outlined earlier. He stated the following: He, the exalted in his remembrance, says, Allah does not guide to the truth and his deen, namely Islam, and the recognition of his oneness, any ungrateful liar who slanders against Allah and fabricates falsehood concerning him, and he who ascribes to him what is not of his attributes, claiming that he has a son, fabricating lies against him, being ungrateful for his blessings and denying his lordship. Objectively, At-Tabari considered them liars outright because Allah the Majestic has no consort, son, daughter, nor any form of offspring, while the Mushrikeen may have argued that they were truthful, albeit subjectively, in expressing their own beliefs on these matters. One second.
I think it's end of chapters or something, or a section.
Nearly, just got a few paragraphs left.
Okay, finish it and then we stop.
Yeah.
What's the time now?
It's 10:21. Yeah, we can finish after this. Another page left, just under a page.
Okay.
Yet there is another critical point here to consider in relation to their lying, which is their claim that their only motivation and considered goal of their worship was in seeking closeness or proximity to Allah. The phrasing of the verse from 39:3 shows this by way of proposition illa, only or except, which is a form of exclusivity. Ma na'buduhum illa. We only worship them. Arguably, it's more likely that they were deeply insincere in that too, seeking to prostrate themselves as somehow being devoted to Allah, their only objective being to draw near to Him, and thus ultimately or inadvertently worship Him too. The retort to the call of Islam and Tawheed, in their view, would have been there was no need to trouble them with these matters since they weren't far away outwardly from this. However, they very well knew deep in their hearts that they had other sinister motives and beliefs. They held a belief that the supposed gods and deities they worship could decide on many matters absolutely without reference to Allah whatsoever. The worship of Allah for them being far too distant, remote, or meaningless. Yet, contrary to the reality of the beliefs held by the Mushrikeen, the sect of Wahhabism has exceeded all bounds. For example, claiming that their statements made regarding the partner in the pre-Islamic Arab talbiyah was entirely true. They exacerbated this falsehood against Allah by asserting that the Mushrikeen firmly believed that the partner was nothing more than a slave or own creature, created and subjugated, who neither harms nor benefits and possesses no power over intercession, death, life, or resurrection, or perhaps even a dead corpse residing in a grave, or a stone idol, or a dry piece of dry wood, who neither hears, sees, nor even understands. Okay, so that ends this chapter. So your closing statement there is basically just to rebuke the way that
it's very clear. The whole book is about that.
So what's this? So the talbiyah that the Arab Mushrikeen have, there's no God worthy of worship except one you own. Are they? That's what you're referring to there, yeah?
Yeah, this is they claim the Mushrikeen were saying لبيك لا شريك لك إلا شريكا هو لك تملكه وما ملك. But clear, the statement is clear. إلا شريكا, you have a partner, but he belongs to you. You own him. But from their history, from he owns him as a divine being owning another lower class divine being, like human can own another human as a slave, but still divine. That's the point. That's what they try to confiscate. No, they believe it's created. There's nothing, and so on. or about idols, they believe, oh, it's a stone, it doesn't see, and so on. And still they worship it. How can you worship an astra, something from anything which is dead, blind, that doesn't see? It's just absurd. Does not make any sense. But that's what they think. And as evidence, bring what Ibrahim was telling his people. Ibrahim telling the reality of the things, and they say, no, no, no. They represent divine being, because they didn't bother reading what the history, what the Asnam means for the Mushrikeen and so on. That's the reason we have the chapter of Shirk al-Arab and the other shirks at this time. That's the point. That's where the Wahhabi blundered and killed themselves. And that's where they invented Shirk al-Qubur. All of this is because of that. If that's all evaporate, then khalas, there's no problem. But the problem is actually deeper, not the issue of only shirk, even the issue of ahkam and issue of hakimiyya, all of that. It's the same thing. It's the shallow reading of the Quran. That's the source of the evil. It came from there, undeveloped and mushroomed. But became extremely vile when you go to worship graves and killing grave worshipper and hunting behind magician in Iraq instead of fighting the invading kafir enemy, belligerent enemy. They're running behind the so-called magician in villages, Zarqawi and co. That's when you have such misconception of the reality, you just go around like blind and start blundering and striking left, right, center, and so on.
Okay, so we'll conclude the main part of the halakha. I know Abu Muhammad has raised his hand, so far away. I might jump off camera and leave you both to chat while I pray.
Oh, okay. No.
Assalamu alaikum, Professor. Jazakallah khair, Rash. So there's a far-fetched opinion, but it's worth discussing because it's an opinion of the prominent Hassan Saggaf. He's a prominent anti-Wahhabi, but he got his opinion completely wrong. Let me first of all just state his opinion. He said regarding the ayah ما نعبدهم إلا ليقربونا إلى الله زلفى that this statement by kuffar is a blatant lie because when Prophet ﷺ was arguing them, they did not have an answer. So they just blatantly made up this lie, although as Saggaf says that from the Quran itself, he can bring evidence that these kuffar did not believe even in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator of everything. And according to Saggaf, he says that look at the ayah, who created this, who created that, who created the أفلا ينظرون إلى الإبل كيف خلقت. So he concluded that the mushrikeen did not even believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator. So hence their statement ما نعبدهم إلا ليقربونا إلى الله زلفى is a blatant lie. And another evidence for that, he said the ayah terminates إن الله لا يهدي من هو كاذب كفار. So according to him, that they were lying.
Okay.
And
I understand the point.
yeah,
First of all, he mentioned other ayahs of the Quran who in another context maybe they're responding to other people and other issues. That's number one.
exactly.
Secondly, the next ayah, he's not reading it. So he's going in the darkness. The next ayah solves the problem.
لو أراد الله أن يتخذ ولدا.
انتهينا. So he's going in the wrong direction. The same way like the Wahhabi. He's blundering left.
Yeah.
He's trying to get an ayah out of the context and trying to do the same mistake as the Wahhabi. That's where the disease started originally. Right?
So this is a specific type of shirk, which is
one type. Imagine having divine beings of various ranks, especially sons
and sonship, attributing sonship to Allah.
Offspring, so on, anyway, and Isa and so on. That's from Tabari. But the problem, these people cannot forsake they're sticking with half of an ayah or an ayah, taking it in the context. أفلا ينظرون إبل كيف خلقت. Read through الأعلى. Let's get through this one. Let's say سبح اسم ربك الأعلى الذي
خلق فسوى والذي قدر فهدى والذي أخرج المرعى فجعله غثاء أحوى سنقرئك فلا تنسى إلا ما شاء الله إنه يعلم الجهر وما يخفى ونيسرك لليسرى فذكر إن نفعت الذكرى سيذكر من يخشى ويتجنبها الأشقى الذي يصلى النار الكبرى ثم لا يموت فيها ولا يحيا قد أفلح من تزكى وذكر اسم ربه فصلى I think that's in الآية الغاشية.
الغاشية.
الغاشية. Yes,
هل
yes.
أتاك حديث
هل
الغاشية؟
أتاك حديث الغاشية وجوه يومئذ خاشعة عاملة ناصبة تصلى نارا حامية تسقى من عين آنية ليس لهم طعام إلا من ضريع لا يسمن ولا يغني من جوع وجوه يومئذ ناعمة لسعيها راضية في جنة عالية لا تسمع فيها لاغية فيها عين جارية فيها سرور مرفوعة وأكواب موضوعة ونمارق مصفوفة وزرابي مبثوثة أفلا ينظرون إلى الإبل كيف خلقت وإلى السماء كيف رفعت وإلى الجبال كيف نصبت وإلى الأرض كيف سطحت فذكر إنما أنت مذكر لست عليهم بمسيطر إلا من تولى وكفر فيعذب الله عذابا أكبر.
تعريف بالله وأدلة على وجود الله وعلى خالقيته وكذا، ما لها علاقة بالشرك والتوحيد وإنما بوجود الله سبحانه وتعالى.
It's for the existence of Allah. Yes.
Yeah, essentially. And there have been people, especially those who deny بعث.
Exactly. Because there's a prominent
and about accounting. So the issue is بعث النشور. So these will say إنما هي أرحام تدفع وأرض تبلع وما يهلكنا إلا الدهر. ما في يعني إله بالمعنى اللي يخلق وكذا. فلم تشوفوا خلق الإبل كيف والحكمة فيه سواء كفروحة إلى آخره. فاللي يقدر على هذه ويسوي هذا التنظيم قادر على ما يبدأ الخلق ثم يعيده. إيه وهو أهون عليه من هذا الباب. فهذا رد على جماعة آخرين وأنواع الشرك والكفر كثيرة متنوعة. فاستشهاده بهذا راح يدور أشياء أخرى في القرآن. كويس إنه يدور أشياء أخرى في القرآن بس
in English please.
يعني لو واحد قاعد يتكلم مثلا عن آية الطلاق وجاب أفلا ضرب كيف خلقت راح يقول هذا مجنون ما عقله ما هو في راسه. إيش علاقة الطلاق بأفلا ضرب كيف خلقت؟
Yeah, it's a different topic, different type of
different topic, different type of shirk, different type of مشكلة.
So then one issue remains. How do you make tafsir to the ending of the ayah? إن الله لا يهدي من هو كاذب كفار. What's the meaning of كاذب here in this sense?
Attributed to Allah's sons and daughter. That's
okay. Yes.
That's it. That's the correct meaning. If you take the next ayah and see the historic context and which kind of majority belief in that the one who taking Zulfa claiming there's the divine is multiple and one is the supreme one, and they claim maybe even they are lying in the sense that we intend only the supreme one. You Muhammad say worship Allah alone. We're doing that, but this is just bring us closer to that. We are focusing on the big one. But even that they are lying. Good, even the minor one. Look, for example, when they in a shock say that Jesus Christ, nobody say, oh God. Really, they say, but normally Jesus Christ, Jesus. That's it. Supposedly, but for them, Jesus is equal to Allah anyway. No, Jesus is the Son is not the Father, and the Father is not the Holy Spirit, the Son, but the Son is God, the Father is God, and all the totality is one God. So it's a complicated thing. So saying Jesus, but you never, the Holy Spirit is never invoked. Sometimes say, oh God, yeah, Mashi. That could be mean any one of the three. But to say what the poor Holy Spirit, he's never said Holy Spirit. Never, you never hear it. So there's a ranking subconsciously there. So in that case, for the Mushrikeen as less sophisticated, because Christians made it very sophisticated with the Trinity. For the Jews, we don't know because this category who worship angels and Uzair and things like that, I think Uzair is not the Ezra the priest. I think it's most likely Uzair is an angel of death, Israel. That's most likely that. But we don't because this medieval history of the Jews had been essentially erased from, because who is keeping the records? The Jewish scholars themselves, and they are all rabbinic or Qara'in.
The rabbinic, yes.
So that's erased. But in Middle Ages and even up to the time of Christ and slightly before, they were idol worshippers under the Jews. And were subcategories like Kabbalah, were defining Baal as a son of God, and all these messy things. Only traces remaining in the Dead Sea Scrolls and the elephantine papyruses and so on. Otherwise, you don't find it anywhere. It has been erased from history. And the monotheism of the rabbinic Jews is the one which remains. So people think the Jews are relatively monotheistic. There is no son of God as well. But the Quran proves that it was at the time. And it was very rampant.
Professor, on a different matter, no, it is very important, I guess, this one. There's an authentic hadith which Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام says, الدعاء هو العبادة. And then he recited, وقال ربكم ادعوني أستجب لكم إن الذين يستكبرون عن عبادتي سيدخلون جهنم داخرين.
The meaning of this is just that supplication Allah Ta'ala shows your need to Him, shows your humility, your enslaving yourself to Him. So it looks like this is the core, and there's the other weak narration, مخ العبادة. The core.
Yeah, مخ العبادة is weak, narrated by Abu Hurairah.
But this weak and strong really is questionable. It's because one narrator they didn't like for whatever reason. Maybe we should study that separately. But in any case, here it is not meaning that that's the definition of al-ibadah. Good definition is clear in the Quran. It's clear in the Quran. The meaning here is that really to express your enslavement to Allah Ta'ala and believing in Him, and there is the only one deity who ultimately control everything, is by supplicating. That shows poverty. And that's by the meaning submission and slavery. Yeah. The strongest submission, or the strongest expression of the genuine ibadah is dua.
Yeah, but I think this needs a little bit more explanation, because here maybe a Wahhabi can come and say, you see, dua equals ibadah. That's what the Prophet.
And sujood is not ibadah. So if it's then sujood, then he has refuted his other theory. It doesn't work this way. This is here metaphorical.
Metaphorical.
Yeah, it's exaggeration. The dua is very important. Do as much dua as you can. Displease Allah and show that you are enslaving yourself to Him. Is the best expression for ibadah. Although praising Allah alone is higher than that, but that one does not show really that you are enslaving yourself. It's just praise. It's just statement of facts. La ilaha illallah is not a dua. It's a statement. It's the highest possible statement. Better than. But that's the reason it is the dua al-istiftah. We have three dua of istiftah. Well, the first one is the most supreme one and the most common. سبحانك اللهم بحمدك استغفرك سبحانك وبحمدك تبارك اسمك تعالى جدك هذا pure praise. But does this show that you are slaves? I've shown. The next one you show slavery, which is اللهم باعد بيني وبين خطاياك وبعدت بين المشرق ونقي من خطايا إلى آخره. The third one in rank is asserting of faith. That shows that your ego is a little bit in front, so it's the lowest in rank. وجهت وجهي للذي فطر السماوات والأرض حنيفا وما أنا مشركين. So the first one, only the divine appears. You disappear, everything disappears. سبحانك اللهم بحمدك وتبارك اسمك وتعالى جدك ولا إله غيرك. Pure praise. Nothing there except the divine. That's the highest level in matter of statements. Next, اللهم باعد بيني وبين خطاياي, show you need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help you overcoming your sins and so on. The third one is lower, is the least desirable of the three, because it said وجهت وجهي I am here, I am.
So these statements, are you saying that they are part of supplication, dua?
Which one?
These statements that you just said in Arabic.
No, these are dhikr, أنواع من الذكر, and the highest dhikr is the one which the slave disappears, everything is except Allah.
But all are part of dua. You are saying all are part of supplication.
No, I'm not saying that. Say that's the statement that La ilaha illallah is not a dua. It's a statement of fact, and it's the highest statement. Like when narration says, Musa Allah, teach me a dhikr, which nobody of your creation say. Say قل لا إله إلا الله. Say all your creation say La ilaha illallah. Say the best dhikr is La ilaha illallah. If the whole universe is doing on a scale, and there is another scale, La ilaha illallah will be heavier. This is the most fundamental and absolute fact.
So then one can say that a dhikr should be a dhikr huwa al-ibadah.
No, because this is not the expression of submission and enslavement. A dua is because it shows expression, because ibadah meaning showing submission based on the belief of He is the one and only. But if you mention the dhikr of Allah, mentioning the statement which pleases Allah as dhikr, the highest level is where nominally the one who speaks disappears. Only the statement itself stands alone. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك وتبارك اسمك. Yes, you are there بسبحانك اللهم. Our that's there, but linguistically by necessity of language only. But the one who uttering that is not there. Nothing of his.
Yeah, he's not present.
Yeah,
he's
and
not expressing for himself. Yes, yes.
It's just the divine is in the form.
Yeah,
look at
default
the
statement.
It starts with praise. أول شيء بسملة. I'm following the correct reading. بسملة is a separate ayah, but every surah starts بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم to start with. الحمد لله رب العالمين. And Allah responds, حمدني عبدي. الرحمن الرحيم أثنى علي عبدي. ملك يوم الدين مجدني عبدي. So this is the various level. Then إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. هذه اسمه دي expressing slavery, state of enslavement. And then اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. هذه لعبدي ولعبدي ما سأل. أما إياك نعبد يقول هذه بيني وبين عبدي، له النصف ولي النصف.
Now this is only for dua, but another types of worship, if we call it the act of worship, is sujood. We know that the prostrating for Allah, Prophet said, أقرب ما يكون الرجل لربه وهو ساجد. The closest the Muslim is when he is prostrating.
He's the lowest, because the most submissive, the most lower physically.
Yeah, but so that puts it on par, on the same level with dua.
I don't know if it's same level or not same level is irrelevant, but I'm saying this one is exaggeration, meaning when you say dua والعبادة, make dua, make dua continuously. That's the meaning, to encourage to make dua, not to ignore dua.
I see.
That's the reason he said people sometimes give up dua because they think they are not responded to, but then it will be responded to either this way or this way or this way. So Umar said, then we will do plenty. Say Allah is more plenty than what you think. Just make dua.
So, okay, I understand you. So this is like a metaphorical encouragement, not a literal. Not a literal.
Or you do it, read the word dua in the meaning we with the previous session said dua had 4 meanings. One of it is calling for help and things like that. What the direct meaning say. But maybe dua attributing divinity to something. The one who they declare to be divine beside Allah. So then it is clearly the ibadah in that sense.
I see.
Then word dua meaning then called upon as divinity.
Yeah, I see.
Attributing divinity. So this is a statement which is more in the rhetoric side.
I see. Because this is very important, because the Wahhabis, most of the scholars of the Wahhabi sect that I hear them, they always provoke this hadith, although it is authentic hadith narrated by Shu'bah.
Yeah, but does it help them? Does it help them? Because if it is dua equal ibadah, either you mean dua with general meaning, yes. الذين يدعون من دونه لا يستطيعون صرف الدنيا عنكم تعيين معناها they call them as a divine being, and that's all what we need there. Calling them as divine being, because we discussed in the previous حلقة check in the book of Tawheed, the Arabic one, the meaning of dua. There's about 4 meaning. One of them is just calling, دعاء ونداء. يا فلان تعال come on, that's his dua, that's call.
And da'wah, invitation.
Yeah, we said that. One meaning is in that specific in the Quran, meaning attributing divinity. In that case, it's equal to ibadah, which you refute their point of view. Finish it. And then the 4th one is dua, meaning dua mas'ala, asking for something. And that will be then, if you exaggerate, that's what shows really that you are really in need.
I see.
You need a little bit more in these things, because these things are connected to mindset, to spirituality, things like that. But if you want to go to the strict things of Tawheed and Shirk, Islam or Kufr, you have to be more strict. Rhetoric is not enough.
I see. So the type of dua that Prophet meant in this hadith is the one that
attribution divinity.
To divinity. Yes.
While the other hadith, even if you say weak or assume that a dua mukh al-ibadah, meaning simply showing poverty and need. Then it's the mukh, the core of this is what show really a submission and slavery.
I see.
In all these, al-ibadah here meaning the ibadah of Allah, not ibadah of idols and so on. Because the ibadah of Allah will be demolished and become zero with any type of shirk. والابتعاء of the idol, العبادة of the idols is perfectly fine even if shared with someone else, because then it's definition attributing some divinity to someone else. That will be عبادة. Except عبادة Allah, it cannot be attributed to Allah except it's by Tawheed. If you attribute to Allah and someone else, then you are not making ibadah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is rejected.
Yeah, that's why the Prophet.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why the Prophet he then narrated the ayah وقال ربكم ادعوني أستجب لكم. Allah says like ask me, he will grant you.
After dua هو العبادة.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, then if he means then the meaning of ibadah of showing poverty and asking, begging, مسألة.
Okay.
Yeah, means that.
Okay.
Then it is rhetorical, because this is the best expression of being a slave. The dhikr and the other thing, the dhikr is the best expression that you are rational, you understand what Allah is all about. Is everything and you are nothing, essentially. That's something else. But expressing that you are in, because what's mean ibadah? Inni ana Allahu la ilaha illa. So what is the result of that? What you should base on that? Fa'budni. Enslave yourself to me. Worship me. Go down completely in front of me. Regard me as the absolute owner and sovereign. Based on Inni ala Allahu la ilaha. There is no other divinity. And by necessity then, the ultimate commander and owner, then you are the ultimate slave and commanded upon. Fall down on your face. And physically, sujood is the lowest body situation. Then you are closer to Allah. The more you are lower, you're more closer to Allah.
By the way, Professor, I'm just checking the context of this ayah that Prophet recited, وَقَالَ رَبُّكُمْ ادْعُونِي أَسْتَجِبْ لَكُمْ. Here's an interesting, the follow-up ayahs. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says in the same context, هو الحي لا إله إلا هو فادعوه مخلصين. So ask him purely, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Or فادعوه يعني attribute all devotion to him, purely to him alone, مخلصين له الدين, making all devotion purely to him. Could be this, could be this, could be both. Cannot
and then the following ayah قل إني نهيت أن أعبد الذين تدعون من دون الله.
The one attribute divinity to them, the call upon for whatever, calling for help or calling them as divine.
I see.
To give both meaning there for in that one. But دوني أستجب لكم is clearly supplicate to me. المسألة. And in the case supplicating to Allah or any divine being is both دعاء مسألة and it is an act of worship. Because it's connected with belief in divinity. If it is not, then it is just سؤال مسألة. Yeah.
I see. Now I get the general frame. Whenever Allah is the addressee, it covers both attributing divinity and asking.
Not necessarily, depending. ادعوني استجب لكم هذه واضحة. إن الذين يستكبرون بعدين يستكبرون عن عبادتي. So if you don't ask me, you are not enslaving to me. So you are مستكبر. You are refusing to submit. You are refusing to submit to me, because what is the easiest form of submission is to ask for help. You don't need even to do sujood. You don't need to move even a finger.
Yeah.
Feed me. Even that, so trivial. But if you refuse even to do that, then you are arrogant. You don't want to enslave yourself. فأنت مستكبر.
I see.
عكس العبادة الاستكبار. الذين يستكبرون عن عبادتي. Those who are arrogant to submit to me, to become completely enslaved to me. Yeah. Okay.
I see.
So if you get all of that, then it will fit together. But we have to, because the Wahhabi way of doing things mess things up that we need to expand in such a way which feel sometimes unnatural. فقط was no problem. He said ما نعبدكم أيتها الآلهة إذا تقربوا من الله زلفى. يعني ما نقصدكم، أنت نقصد أبوكم وكبيركم. يعني بلغة بسيطة عامية ماشي الحال. ما كانت تعقد الأمور، ما طلع لهم ذكر الوقت بالتيمية ولا بن عبد الوهاب حتى يحوز هذا. بس that's it.
You know that the unfortunate fact, ya Sheikh, is that every book that I read in response to the Wahhabis, those who are prominent to the Wahhabi sect,
They make all the
yeah,
same mistake. They don't put things in
absolutely.
context.
Even with Rububiyyah and Uluhiyyah.
The same.
Similarly here,
The same.
Saggaf, he made the same mistake.
The
Rububiyyah
same.
and he conflated with Uluhiyyah.
Yeah, the
So
same thing.
unfortunately, subhanallah, I never read like a very thorough book like the Book of Tawheed. Jazakallah khair for it. So
Alhamdulillah.
yeah, so that
On the
so
next
Saggaf
edition
and
will
so
be
on
inshallah
are
more
not.
polished, and we all these things discussed, and we'll polish it further, and we try to make the sentences much clearer and so on.
Absolutely. Because Saggaf and his like are from the Ash'ari background, the anti-Wahhabi. So the most of his book is about Tawheed Asma and Sifat. He neglected the most important Tawheed Uluhiyyah and Rububiyyah and made the same mistakes. And then he more than the half of his book about Tawheed Asma and Sifat.
Yeah. And Asma Sifat is not should not be studied under Tawheed. They didn't bypass, so this dispute about Asma and Sifat, which is really a philosophical discussion, so they can squeeze it under Aqidah and especially under Tawheed. You are mushrik, انتبه. So that's the reason. Is intellectual terror. And the same with Ibn Taymiyyah. When he did not like the graves and all these things. He may be right, may be wrong. But he wanted to administer the knockout, KO. So he has to get it something more serious than just undesirable, disliked, haram, and so on. He wants something more serious. Shirk. Shirk Akbar. Jahannam forever. That's more terrifying. But it's wrong. But the result is that it backfires against them or led them to killing those magicians in the villages of Iraq and leaving the Americans. Invader and running behind them. And if they go to a grave which have some raised graves, they put so much dynamite that almost they themselves are killed by the explosion. You have seen some picture in time of Syria.
Yes.
They demolished some shrine there, but they did not. They overestimated the amount needed, with the result that they barely run away from the flying rocks.
Yeah.
So it becomes madness. Your brain becomes twisted. It doesn't work properly. Instead of looking forward, you look to the side. That's a problem. And job is to get you in that direction. Not to say that these graves are raising and not raising is an issue or an issue. It may be an issue, maybe a secondary issue. Maybe haram, maybe not even haram. You have to study that in its own merits.
So you are saying that Tawheed Asma and Sifat should not be in the book of Tawheed
no,
anyway.
What's the meaning of Tawheed Asma and Sifat?
The attribution of names and the
what has that to do with Tawheed or non-Tawheed? Studying Asma and Sifat, دراسة الأسماء والصفات، لاهوت الأسماء والصفات، علم الكلام متعلق بالأسماء والصفات. ما له إيش توحيد، ما معنى the meaning of كلمة توحيد. Does not make any meaning. Does it mean that you don't make the divine attributes to any other being? That's clear. That's clear. Nobody disputed that. No Wahhabi, no Ash'ari, nobody. Everybody agree that if we talk about the divine power is absolutely different than human power. With absolutely different apart from anybody other power, and so on. Nobody has any problem with that.
So the nature
of divine essence, then the question, how is his power above, equal to Allah or not? That's what they have to struggle with the Trinity. Are co-equal to Allah or co-eternal, or they are what they call it submissive to Allah. All previous school before the Nicene Conference, except a minority, were saying the Holy Spirit and Isa are lower than Allah. And even the churches, if we go to a church, you see, for example, this glass with stained glass, you see three channels in the long glass there. And the middle one is having at the top a crown. A crown is symbolizing the Father, the King. To his right, that's to your left, you see a lamb carrying a cross. That's symbolizing the lamb sacrificed at the beginning of the world. That's Isa. You see to the left, to your right, left of the crown, assume you are sitting with the crown, then it's to your left. That's your right of the one who looking. Is a white pigeon, is a dove. What is the dove? Is the Holy Spirit. And they are lower. The crown is there, and the crown is in the middle here, and the lamp is here, and the pigeon, the dove here. Go to any church and take a look if it has the stained glass, usually 3 channels, the middle channel and so on. And usually it's very darkly colored. I don't think it seems to be well-established tradition عندهم that the churches are to be like dark and كئيبة كده, look like funeral place and things like that. It's not nicely enlightened. If you enter a mosque, you see sometimes the lights blind you. Here the opposite, you have to wait a little until your eye adjusts to the darkness. And the stained glass is stained with dark blue and other things, relatively dark and red and so on. And I noticed in any church I entered in England, in Germany, I did not focus on that, amazingly. But I never thought about that at the time. But here, every church I went to, everywhere is having this feature in the stained glass. The middle, there's a crown, and to your left, the left of the observer, or to my left, is a lamb, and sometimes the lamb is having a cross carried on his back like this. Who is that? That's symbolizing Isa, the lamb, who will be sacrificed at the foundation of the world. And the right is the white dove. What's the white dove? Is the Holy Spirit, because the narration claims that on baptism, a white dove came from heaven, which is the Holy Spirit. And the lamb, because I think in Matthew, one of the disciples, one of the 12, exclamated, say, "Behold the lamb who was being sacrificed at the foundation of the world," meaning Isa. This is all of this fabricated, has never been said by any one of those guys, but let it go. That's it. And the crown is above higher. So that was until now, even with the Trinity, still the crown is somehow higher. They still all agree on that. But they say equal in substance, from the same substance. But they still cannot get away from the so many evidences that Isa is lower and the Holy Spirit is lower than the Father, the crown, the king. That's how it's symbolized in churches. See, if you're in the other side of the Atlantic, go to some state, maybe you will find.
I think similar, because
the problem in your area, churches are all new. In England, I have entered in churches 500 years, 700 years old. Maybe that's for Middle Ages. But
I think all Anglican churches like this, ya Sheikh. It's like gloomy.
Then in Canada and America, many are Anglican or Protestant. They may have that, may not. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because some faction of Protestants, they hate pictures and symbolism and so on. There was a wave, even they demolished the old pictures from the old churches. So you go to some ancient churches, which has been before the Reformation, and you find statues and things like that for angels with defaced and faces broken. So what's happened? Said our Wahhabi did that in time past. Yeah, they had a wave like that for some time. For several centuries, not for a short time. We say these pictures, all of them is like idols. The iconoclast controversy, which started around the time of when Islam came, most like motivated by Muslims, not like pictures and statues.
Yes.
So that caused some, and there was discussion ongoing about icons and non-icons, remove icons, keep icons. And this continued for centuries without any violence. But when the Protestants came, there was a violent wave for several centuries. And many of the old, beautiful churches, and the angels and so on, were defaced. And some of the nice drawing and so on were painted over. So they have also their own Wahhabis, extremists. So. Anyway, before we close, Rash will become soon. Small update. It seems to be there's a strong rumor said by Larry Johnson, is that he has a source claiming that on Friday the Pakistani foreign minister informed Marco Rubio with a threatening tone that Iran will do a nuclear experiment quite soon. So if that's true, meaning at this time they were negotiating and stretching so that they can complete the enrichment and complete the device. Now, Larry Johnson and others speculating is that they made the bomb themselves or got the design from Pakistan or North Korea. I think people have no clear idea that especially Iranian bomb is quite trivial to design. It's just like a cannon, and cannon technology is perfected before the World War II. From the 19th century and early this century, it came to perfection. So you shoot a piece against the other one. If they are separated good distance, then they are not critical. Because if critical mass for uranium of like 90%, 95% or some enrichment is about 10 kilograms, which is small actually, because uranium is very dense, 20 gram per cubic centimeter. So 10 kilogram is just half a liter, essentially, yeah? Yeah, half a liter is 500 centimeter. If we have a density of 20, meaning we get to 10 kilogram with a half liter, yeah? Small piece. So imagine half a liter is like this size. So one piece here with a hollow, another set with like an arrow, and boom, shooting them against each other. If you design that very well, you don't need even to test. You can calculate in advance and use maybe soft material and calculate the pressure and so on without having any fishable material. And that's the reason the American, even in World War II, the first test, they call the Trinity test. I don't know why I use that name, Trinity test. Maybe to cover up as if it's a religious project. Or if any spy is working in America to pull the spies. They developed the uranium bombs, which they called it long man because it's long. At the time, it was very long and very big. It was very clumsy, not developed yet. Now it's very small. And one which is called Fat Boy. Fat Boy is like sphere that's exactly plutonium surrounded by explosive to compress it. Plutonium is done by compression, which is very complicated and difficult at that time. Nowadays, you can even do tests on another material and do the calculation. You don't need to do a real test with explosives, with the nuclear material, with plutonium. But at that time, it was not yet under control. So the first test was a plutonium bomb. That's the one in Nevada. And then they had 2 plutonium and 1 uranium. So they did the test with the plutonium. It worked, Nevada, famous one. And they calculated to about 15 to 20,000 ton, 15 to 20 kilotons. And then the uranium one, they did not even test it, just based on the calculation. And they dropped the uranium one. I think the uranium one is the long man, is the one who dropped on Hiroshima. And it worked first time without any testing of this type. And the second plutonium, first one was tested and successful, was in Nagasaki, if I remember correctly. So what needed testing that time is the plutonium one, because the issue of compression, uniform compression, to have the density inside increased to 3-fold, it has to go into 3-fold, because you start, let's say, with 3 kilograms. That's not critical. You have to have the density, you have to have like 9 kilograms. 9 kilograms, where you get 9 kilograms at that time? It's almost impossible. But they got 3 and 3. But if you compress correctly, 3 times, then it is equivalent to 9 kilograms, the 3 kilograms. And that needs the testing. After that, you don't need. You just design with and then you know the design. So it is not as complicated as people make it up. The problem is to get a fissile material, either from a reactor or from enrichment. That's the problem. We need work, intercentrifuge and so on. The design of a final bomb is relatively trivial, because you have to add security and various important things, because it's a very dangerous device. It's not a bomb of half a ton or ton. If it explodes, it demolishes 1 or 2 houses. This can demolish a whole city or the whole base. So you have to put extra securities and so on, several layers, usually 6-7 securities before ignition. But that's the difficult side, not the mechanism itself. Mechanism is almost trivial for the uranium and slightly more difficult for the plutonium, but all are mastered now. And well, I don't think the Iranians have a problem to have that mechanism made. Maybe it made long ago. It could be even have been made in the early 90s. It's really trivial. I was in the nuclear committee of Saudi Arabia. I know what's it. It's really trivial. The fissile material is the problem, because you have to enrich if it's uranium, and plutonium is not available in nature. You have to produce it in reactors. And the reactors obviously supervised by everyone and watch and so on. They know amount, and the International Atomic Commission comes and measure everything, catch every milligram. So that's a problem. The fissile material, not the design of the bomb itself. And there are plenty of fishable material. So maybe they use the opportunity of these few days to enrich the 61. The ones up to 60 were about 400 plus kilogram. If you, that's at 60%, 60%. If you get it to 90 or 95 or even 100%, multiply 400 per 0.6. That's 240 kilogram. Easily 20 warheads. Because a warhead for uranium, you need only 10 kilogram. With good design, obviously. And they will be able to do with this. As we are not in at the time of the World War. We are now 80 years later. And Iran is very skilled in explosive and hypersonic. So they should have that long ago. I'm not sure they have it. So with security of impurity negotiation, they will get that. Because otherwise, they will be harassed forever. If the rumor is correct. I hope, because this is the only way to work. Look what North Korea did to them. They were putting all kinds of pressure. And then when this foreign minister in the 18th century went there, trying to put pressure and so on them, and they told him, why are you doing all that? To prevent you from nuclear. We said, don't waste your time. We have already a few. Ma'as-salama, bye. Try to attack us. It became futile. And they have, I think, 5 or 6 at that time. And they tested one and was underground. But it can be measured and known that this is a nuclear test underground. And the 5 others enough to demolish South Korea and the American base there. So the American gave up. These people stop only if they know that their skull will be cracked. Unfortunately, that's how the world works. So what can we do? Except to accept the reality. Anyway, that's the breaking news. Let's wait and see. Maybe it come to the daylight. It's sooner than we expect, hopefully. But if it's the correct way to go.
One question that came late, but we can wait till next week, inshallah. So while it comes on to the person who asked is about Tasharruf awliya fi own for living awliya. We can leave that for the question answer next week, inshallah.
Inshallah, okay.
Inshallah. To the person who asked, if you join next week on Zoom, you can always ask on the mic, inshallah, to go into more detail.
Okay. يلا سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نستغفرك ونتوب اليك اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد كما صليت على ابراهيم وآل ابراهيم في العالمين انك حميد مجيد وبارك على محمد وآل محمد كما باركت على ابراهيم وعلى آل ابراهيم في العالمين انك حميد مجيد تصبحون على خير والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.